All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm sure my voice sounds a little bit better than it did before. Some of you may have heard the, excuse me. So some of you may have heard the, what am I trying to say here? Uh, some of you may have heard the video that I recorded on the weekend to, I don't know, try and just try and let people know that there wouldn't be YouTube videos this week. But I'm definitely not better. The real drawback here is that I have tried to. I definitely couldn't take the time off work. Like if I really, really had to, I'm sure, I could have made something work with work. But essentially, my routine has been to go straight from work to home, hop under the covers, have some tea, and just generally rest up. And I was definitely not feeling at a point. My voice was actually still not really in a spot where I could sustain a 3 hour stream. On top of the fact that it would make a heck of a lot more sense not to push it. Um, so Monday was a non-starter for sure. Wednesday, my voice really just um, was not ready. Um, and I mean, obviously, I'm not really better now, but it's not completely unreasonable for me to be streaming tonight. So, first of all, I do apologize for the absences. They're not decisions that I make lightly, but if anything, um, setting myself up for a problem on the weekend. So the deal here is that I'm going to do my best to do a full stream tonight, and I'll do my best to run through the game. We'll I don't know. I'll have a couple of ideas in terms of objectives, but it is fair to say right now we are looking to get through as many books as I can, and also to have a thought about some of our potential candidates for the Lighthouse Institute. So, depending on what your definition of progress is, I know it's always somebody who stops by the YouTube channel is like, "Oh, lol, this isn't playing the game." So again, we're not going to be making a whole lot of progress, further stories or Lighthouse Institute wise. I mean, you never know, right? These things I suspect will probably happen quite quickly when they're ready, but it's not the main goal right now. I think the main goal is going to be to process the lessons that I already have, to try and catch up with the books. I'm sure we will wind up with a Numa sooner rather than later. And there's not a whole lot for me to do during Numa because I believe I have committed all the lessons. And so, I don't know, like I don't really think there's as much for me to do during Numa other than maybe make sure that I don't recklessly lose lessons for no reason. And I think probably once we have exhausted the library, that's maybe a time when I need to start thinking about some, I'll say, satisfying conclusions to the further stories that also give me what I need for the Lighthouse Institute. I am slightly disappointed that I haven't been able to sit down and experiment with my save file to see if I can sort of graft on the Lighthouse description that I have in the other save, but obviously, where I can, I try to make the time that I spend on stream things. I'm using Stream generally, so that's video on demand for YouTube as well as broadcasts. But where I can, I really would like to gear that more towards content creation rather than maintenance, right? It's the reason why I don't do edits. It's the reason why, there's a lot of things that are sort of nice to haves. I guess it's a little bit like independent game development, really, right? Like, there's always going to be people who say the things that they would really like, and it's not even that they're bad ideas. Obviously, if I could edit down my videos and make them a little bit more digestible for people, I'm sure this would lead to greater viewership. But it would also mean that more of the time is spent on things that are basically not making videos. So we do the best with what we've got. Okay, So I think the last time, yep, the third. We missed the Agonalia of Janus yesterday. Well, I didn't miss it, but we didn't do it as a stream. Okay, so we've got Sacralamea, Menascate Reflections, Quenchings and Quellings, Horns and Ivories, and Spices and Savors. Now, I believe I was going to use this for weaving and not working. So the question that I have is whether or not we're actually working on... Alright, interesting. So it looks like I'm not doing too much lessons-wise. So probably the first thing that I want to do is try and collect as many things to level up Sacralamea as I can. We only have... Effectively, we only have a minute. So what I'll probably want to do here is find a Tryst to throw at it. So I'll maybe just leave a Tryst aside. For Sacralamea... Oh, hang on. Right. So I'm using the Sacralamea to level up Weaving and Not Working. So that's going to require Heart and Moth. So with that in mind, again, it's the end of the world, so we'll do everything that we can to make this work. Heart and Moth. Okay, so the Green Jade tablet will give us some Moth. That's an impulse. Oh, but I'm... Oh no, here we go. Okay, so one Moth. Heart should be next. Right, I still need to work out the... Oh yes, and I have the Satisfaction to work with. So we actually have two. Okay, Solace works. So that's 3. Four gives me Cheerful Ditty. So I suppose it's just a storm at that point. I would normally try and do a sound, except that we're already using the consider verb. Tuberosity, how you doing? As always, you have no idea what's going on here, but I hope you're having fun doing it anyway. I'm always happy to explain. I know you're saying you're lurking, so this is never an effort for me to try and sort of smoke out anybody who's interested in, or to smoke out some chat participation, but if you ever do have questions, particularly if you are interested in playing this game on your own stream, which of course everybody who's watching, I don't think there's too many yet, can use as their own little signal to check out your stuff. But if you do have questions about what's going on, please don't hesitate to ask them. Obviously, I get a lot of enjoyment out of being able to explain this to people. Especially because I also feel this is a game, for the people who are fans of this game, but maybe haven't engaged a whole lot with what the developers do as part of, for their interviews or, any other kinds of engagements. Excuse me. The team is quite... Excuse me. The team's actually quite careful to not to break the spell. They're quite careful to give the game enough space to let people draw their own conclusions, and that I think is some of the great fun of this game and why the setting has the power that it does. And I think it's really interesting to see them make that, because like clearly there are a lot of people who want to know the answers to certain things. And I imagine for some people who have created it, if there's something that hasn't been discovered, there can be that temptation to want to see people get it. But I think what's really interesting here is that they've always been willing to, have a longer view, and essentially to allow the game to have its mysteries and to let people continue to enjoy it in that regard. Even if maybe the short-term pleasure of telling someone what's what isn't necessarily there, or that may just not be their temperament. But I certainly understand how there can be a really strong effort to want to like show off your cleverness, or to try and help someone who's struggling a little bit. And the fact that they so consistently make sure that the setting remains in a state that people can enjoy it, I think is really neat. It also looks like a paperback storybook medieval vault builder. It's not a terrible way of putting it. You're really restoring an ancient library rather than building one. But the art style is really unique. It's one that I personally like very much. I did run into a couple people who actually said, excuse me, they didn't care for it. Night has fallen, dawn will come soon. This actually suggests to me that I may not get the the Sacralamea leveled up before the end of the day. But you know what? That's I can live with that. Excuse me. But yeah, so I mean, essentially, you play the librarian of Hush House, this ancient library that we're maintaining here, and one of the things that's interesting is that you do know that the library was abandoned after a fire, but when you arrive, the place looks relatively intact. Something small and rare. Crack open the container. Delight in your discovery. It's actually why I've been. It's why I haven't streamed the past couple of days to Curiosity. I had. I did have a very, very bad. Well, like just my voice was gone. The problem really was the fact that I streamed on the Friday, I think. But choices have consequences. So I did miss 2 days, and I really don't like the idea of missing too many streams in a row, especially unannounced. So I went ahead with this one, and if I need to call it early, I hope people are understanding. But yeah, I mean, essentially here you arrive to find it maybe in better shape than you were expecting, but that's just one question among many. And as you continue to explore the house, obviously here I've unlocked the whole house, but you don't start off with all of the rooms. But as you go through, you don't just learn about the house, but you learn about the very special place that this very special role that this type of institution plays in the greater setting. You're sick Friday evening. 3 hours out in the cold. Good Lord. Yeah, sorry to hear that. Yeah, like I said at the start, I didn't feel I was at a point where I could really, like, especially too, because on the days when I was going in, what was clear to me was that I had excuse me, I'd lost my voice, but that's easily explained by streaming too much. But the fact that sort of later on in the week I sort of have a cough and such, it's like, okay, well, this is probably not just me losing my voice, but I was kind of already in the thing, so I did my best and it sort of moved on. But anyway, just gonna have a quick sip of tea and then we'll read the Amaranus Betelli. A fragment of iron alloy meteorite carefully inscribed and polished. Who gave us fire? Who gave us steel? What is the sound of dusk? Of what alloy is wind forged? Zerog, good to see you. Esoteric secrets of metallurgy and resonance are revealed, including directions towards the creation of a terrible bell. Newman, the bells of Ys. Ys by her arts found the strike tone that shakes the hours. For this reason among many, the hours discourage traffic with Ys, but a bell cast with this secret could speak the Ys note. Any librarian can use this to establish a history and complete the game, but the prodigal and the revolutionary can win a particular victory. And hello, Swedish EOD. Good to see you again. So, Tabirosity was sort of saying that it's a little bit of a medieval vault building simulation. But this is, I kind of find, where some of the fun for this game comes in. So, you've got some capitalized terms here. So, we all know what hours are, but in reference, it would be fair to say, found the strike tone that shakes the hours. Here, really, the capitalization is the indicator. If this was the very first thing that you read in the setting, it might sound very poetic, shake the hours, and particularly because, the bells tend to ring at certain times. It's like, okay, well, maybe this is, a particularly powerful note or something like that, which is true. But in this case, next line, for this reason, among many, the hours discourage traffic with Ys. Well, it's a bit unusual for an hour to do any kind of discouragement. And so in this case, we're dealing with something unique. Ys is not something that is invented for Book of Hours. We've talked about it before, but this is a Breton myth. Or legend. I don't quite know that. I'm sure I could, if really forced to give a definition, I could probably approximate one. But what else? I think these are the only ones that. But yeah, I mean, with that in mind, right, the significance of Ys in the setting and what the hours are, there's not enough inside the Newman. Now, of course, in fairness, the Newman is also something that you're going to see much later on in the game. This would never be the first thing that you see inside the setting. But it's a nice little example of those different ways where even if you sort of feel like you have a good grip on certain ideas, it may not be reasonable to assume that these things have the same meaning or significance that they did. And this can relate to people as well. So at the very beginning of the game, you start seeing these stories of the barons, right? Back in the 11th century, Brian of Brittany built the tower and its gate to protect St. Brendan's Abbey, as Hush House was then known. Later, the Barons de Wolf strengthened the gate against their many enemies, but it's a long time now since Hush House was any kind of fortress, and by the time the scholars of the Curia took possession, this place had long been a comfortable waiting room for visitors to the house, too minor to merit immediate attention. And then you can get a description of the period. In the 16th century, the de Wolf family became the Barons Brandkrug, governing the isle as their personal estate until 1759, when their line ended in madness and death. So the thing is that the barons, on a surface level, you can kind of imagine a bit like you would think a baron, right? But there's actually a bit more significance, and especially once they start writing books that have occult information inside of them, that's where you start saying, there might be a little bit more going on here. And so this is the great fun, that while it's a very beautiful looking game in my view, and it can just be fun to do all of the little crafting bits, as you go through, whether it's characters, whether it's rooms, whether it's, even maybe some of the guests, I think this is some of the fun of the salons. You start getting a bigger idea, not just of the world, but its inhabitants. And of course, the real highlight for me is as you accumulate the memories and the skills and the elements of the soul, you start sort of shaping a worldview yourself, both as a character inside of this game, but also you, the player, gaining a greater understanding. And I think the big thing for me is that it's very, very hard to point to other games that do this. These Weather Factory really seem to have almost a monopoly on these kinds of games that take you on a journey that's almost entirely inside yourself. And I think I am going to get into the books, but I can see in a very indirect way, to a certain extent, this is kind of the same impulse that makes people like games like RimWorld or Crusader Kings, right? These are the games that are very famous for their emergent stories. And it feels a bit weird to say that, right? Because there's a fixed deck of cards that the books are drawn from. The house is always going to have a fixed number of rooms, and you know that you're going to find draws from certain decks inside of those rooms. Whereas, you know, something like RimWorld really is designed to have not an infinite number of possibilities, but the runs are going to become quite different very shortly after you start playing. And yet, I think the thing is that the drama for a game like RimWorld or The Sims is entirely in the connections that you are drawing yourself, right? So if your sim goes up and starts massaging the back of like Mr. or Mrs. Goth, that's, you know, depending on what you assign to that, right? That's going to be, you know, this terrible betrayal of your great friend, or, you know, something exciting, or, you know, the culmination of some sort of tension. And of course, that tension existed entirely in your head, right? These are all just representations. They're a bunch of pixels on a screen. But the thing is that while it's not necessarily going to be the same type of player that likes both games, I think because, again, we talked about this here, where the developers are reluctant to give anybody some hard answers, there are some very clear directions. Like, there's going to be some things where you say, I don't know, here's a good example. The hours are not human mortals like you or I. They may have once been, right, gods from flesh, but I think it would be fairly reasonable to say that an hour is not the same thing as a flesh and blood person like you and I. Maybe there'll be another thing that says that's not, but I feel reasonably fair to say that the gods from flesh, even the gods from flesh, are something distinct from, you know, the weary detective or whatever. Sorry, where was I going with this? Right. So yeah, there's and again, just take your pick in terms of whatever you want, or like, you know, whatever the, you know, what the Carapace Cross is, or whether the Carapace Cross are things that precede humanity or come after humanity. Right. There's some pretty clear pointers as to who these people are and what certain things are. But again, much like the real world, there's lots of room for uncertainty, and there's lots of space to try and get a bit of a grip in terms of what's going on. And so again, while it's not something where you're managing your colonists and, you know, you're not playing the DeWolf, so you don't need to worry about a rebellion coming to take the house. What you do have instead is this idea of not just who you are as a character, but what's happening inside of the setting, what's happening inside of the world, to give you a bit of a story, give you an idea in terms of what might be going on. And to me, that's one of the great rewards of this game. Okay, the Green Jasper Tablet, supposedly copied from a tablet of green jasper, which serves as the covenant stone of the Monastery of the Fifth Cup, the token which gives that library shelter beneath the Watchman's Tree. Humankind itself hid from the glory's light in the roots of the Watchman's Tree, but for every chink we stuffed with cloth and hair, we opened another, and the light crept in, until we looked below into nowhere, and the eye of the mare in the tree winked red. The tablet expounds on the dangers of inviting the nowhere hour called the mare in the tree, and also forbidding her entry, since she can never be entirely be denied. Along the way, it reveals the secret of the sacrament malachite, in which the merry mare merrily spits, brewed with the rights of the roots from the Numa pear in the presence of sufficient nectar aspect. Impulse. It doesn't exactly make sense, but I understand it anyway. The Orchid Transfiguration's Noon, the third volume of a compilation of quasi-Rosicrucian allegories, supposedly by Robert Flood. This is in the original Latin. A long dialogue between the Mountain Mother and the Vigilant Storm describes the ways in which both mountains and storms end and the protections they use against those ends. But we must use the knife, said the lion-throned one, the noose, the flame, the waking word, against those who have passed the three-valve door, and so none may pass. That is our law, and the law of the sun. Solace, peace after trouble. The Perugian Diaries. In 1907, at the age of 18, Christopher Olopoli left Strathcoyne's household to study theology at the University of Perugia in Italy, enrolling under the name Christopher Strathcoyne. For 4 years since his adoption from a Bristol orphanage, Olopoli served as Strathcoyne's pupil and protege, but his relationship with this austere and secretive man was always complicated. His journal confides, I still think Fraser's intentions are good, certainly he agrees, but I never understood the final goal of his investigations. He was never prepared to enlighten me, and good intentions or not, I can no longer bear the stream of eyes. We've agreed to part, almost amicably. Olopoli left Perugia in 1909 without completing his degree. He had long lost interest in his studies, and the latter half of his journal is concerned with his studies of Umbrian folk songs and notes towards his own compositions, which are of widely varying quality. One of the better ones, In the Marshes of Night, suggests he visited the site of Old Lake Fucinus near Ortuccio. Another example here would be there is something referred to as the Ortuccio incident, and there's actually quite a bit you can find out about it if you sort of read between the lines and find a couple of documents inside the game's folders. What does not bark? Alexander Props writes warily of Calyptra, a law, principle, or society which prevents the dissemination of dangerous knowledge. Calyptra, like the planet that occludes the star, or the Doylean dog that fails to bark, can be identified only by its absence. Even the name, I think, must be a mask. Calyptra is said to make exceptions specifically for the libraries of the Watchman's Tree. Does it make those exceptions so the Hours can make use of them? Storm. There are storms great enough to shake the moon from the sky and one's thoughts from one's skull. Okay. So, the plan here was to level up weaving and not working. Or was it weave? Oh dear. Let me make sure that I... Yeah, weaving and not working. So again, I may be sacrificing this tryst for tomorrow, but I don't think that's a terrible way of doing things. At last, I'm something of an authority in this. If anything, just using up the tryst today saves me from generating the satisfaction tomorrow. So while I'm queuing that up, I'm going to follow the same... Excuse me. I'm going to follow the same principle and see if maybe there is a way that I can get a little bit further. So I think... looks like I was going to use Meniscate Reflections to improve Disciplines of the Hammer, which requires 4 and Sharps. Okay. So, for Edge, Forge, and then Edge Moon. Cool. And then Quenchings and Quellings. Oh, hang on, sorry, that was Quenchings and Quellings here, and that was going to go to Surgeries and Exsanguinations. And that's going to need 5. Okay. So you know what? Let's actually just focus on the Edge and Forge and Edge and Moon first. And then I can see what's left over. So like I said, I'm not too worried about the fact that I'm going to lose this over... or that I'm going to have this used up earlier in the morning, because the idea here is I want to use as many of these as early as I can. So in this case, Stolen Secrets. I'm trying to remember if we did... I think we did Lost, so we'll do Gospel of Zacchaeus again. This will give me both a knock and... or sorry, this will give me knock and moon. We're interested in it for the moon, so that's 1 moon. Fear will give me Edge. And that's Hyksos. I don't think the Revelations or Impulse help us right now. This will give me moon. Now I can't recall where I was at. I think we were doing the Locksmith's Dream, but I'm gonna do Portions and Proportions and Incursus again. Okay, patterns will give me Forge. Trying to remember how far we got through this. I think we did the Time of Division, but I'm going to do it again, and then we can do by their marks you shall know them next. Okay, hindsight doesn't help. Satisfaction doesn't help in this case. Regrets doesn't help. Hang on. Regrets gets me Forge. I think we're on Lady Ava's Repose here. The Salt will definitely help. I'm going to do the Larkabine Codex at the start. I've sort of lost the plot a little bit in terms of what the count was for all of the different things, but I think in this case we'll just push ahead with what we've got, and then we'll figure out how to... you know what? Vinzant's Minglings. We'll make it all work the following day. We'll put another medal there. Actually, a Fete might not be a bad idea. Intuition will help me with Moon. Yeah, let's go ahead. Now, Book of Maya uses Hyksos, so let's do the Orchid Transfigurations Volume 1. So again, we're doing this overnight, so I am... Excuse me. I'm not going to have these available throughout the day, but this is just shaving off a few seconds, so in this case we've got about 15 seconds head start on the memories that we need, which of course just means that we'll be able to level up some more skills in the grand scheme of things. So keep using Whist at the Sweet Bones. I could offer help with correspondence and arithmetic. There's no school in Brandkrug, and not everyone here knows their letters. It's a sunny day, so that doesn't help me with my current set of lessons, but that doesn't mean it's useless. Okay, we have the Mirror of Melisandre. I think I may have read this once before, but I actually don't remember its content, so this is definitely one that I want to read. It costs 4 Spintria, which is a bit expensive, but we have a silver to cover the cost. And we just wait for the reading to finish. Although it may not be a bad idea. The skill is now level 6. Its power aspects have also increased. Weaving and not working. Valentine de Wolf. What might not be a bad idea for the Consider verb right now. So I need Edge and Forge for the Menescape Reflections. Or technically I need Edge and Forge for Disciplines of the Hammer, and Edge and Moth for the sharps. So for instance, I could do something like Torg's Cleansing if I thought I needed some more edge. Do we have... So we're just shy of 30 seconds. Quenchings and Quellings. So if I'm going to be putting that towards surgeries and exsanguinations, that one needs heart, so I could use the Hush House key to get heart. And then... Great Signs and Great Scars is Grail and Knock, so the Grail I could drink some water. Finally, Spices and Savors I'll be using for door and wall, so that needs Knock and Forge, I believe. So Forge I can get through touch. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. We're going to listen to the Hush House key. We'll use a core for that. Investigate the object. You won't use this up or consume it by doing this. And then I don't really have too much to do until the desks are done. So this is just getting me... Oh, actually, sorry, that was wrong. I can use... I think we'll use Arab. And nope, that won't work actually. But Disciplines of the Scar, perhaps. Yeah, Torg's Cleansing. Just a little extra edge in case I have use for it. And then we'll split these out. Alright, the Gospel of Zacchaeus, an extremely heterodox account of the Nazarene Messiah and his works, describing his ascension to the mansus through the opening of his body. 7 were the wounds of his body, and 7 the doors of the house, 7 the lesser aspects of the hours, and knock... Excuse me. And knock the aspect above all, for the mother of ants is the mother of salvation. The book includes a description of a rite which can be used to raise a corpse to half-life, in memory of he who bled for the wood, but the marginalia claim that the mother of ants no longer permits use of this rite. So what I want to do here is I actually want to divide these among ones that are specific to the Disciplines of the Hammer and Sharps. Because the hope here would be any of the ones that have edge I'm going to use to fill in the gaps. All right, sorry, just give me a second here. Okay, cool. The Journal of Sir David Green, 1903, a confidential journal kept by Green, former Nocturnal Branch Superintendent, but by 1903 librarian of Hush House. Green has kept his journal in Hyksos, presumably as an extra measure of privacy. In 1903, the House cooperated closely with the branch, and Green was the public face of that cooperation. In private, however, Green is clearly disillusioned with the branch, which he increasingly regards as irresponsible. He is especially concerned about the construction of a suppressive mechanism beneath Brandkrug Jail and its likely occupant. Hours and names are dangerous, he writes, but at least our dealings have the benefit of long experience. An hour who acts before she is born, who leaves those places she has never entered, if her names walk the world already, how can we understand their courses and their capabilities? The last entries alternate between calculations, tides, dates, financial calculations, and expressions of fevered longing for AF. It seems that Green intends to run away with AF, and some of the calculations imply that he has been embezzling funds to that end under the cover of the chaos caused by the Ortuccio incident and the subsequent reorganization of Nocturnal Branch into the Suppression Bureau. These entries, however, stop abruptly before the year's end. It's not clear whether Green did in fact abscond with funds and fond friend, or whether he abandoned his journal for other reasons. So, perfect example here, the fear just goes below because it can go into either one of these. The Larkabine Codex. Christopher Larkabus claims to have purchased 2 handwritten copies of the Codex from a family of witches on the shores of the Sea of Marmara. A third is given to the sea. The sister and witch came from the west, where they were born in 2 wombs, one a princess, one a monster. Nevertheless, they loved each other from birth and met in secret to seek union. When the great drought came, the kings of that land tried to sacrifice the princess and the witch, so they sailed across the sea. When despair took them, and they flung themselves into the drowning waters, so they found the Painted River, where they entered the mansus through the offices of the Red Grail. Nevertheless, the Codex ends with the condemnation of the Grail. Vincent's Minglings. The metallurgist and skysmith Everett Vincent speaks of the sacred alloys, the alloys eternal, the alloys sufficient, and the alloys intendant. Everett describes the voices and powers of mortals and immortals based on their composition by analogy to the sounds and strengths of bells based on the metals of their casting. Vincent warns that the mingling of metals of too great a nobility can produce the alloys incestuous. He suggests very cautiously that the means used by the sovereigns of the Leashed Flame to produce their heirs may have analogous issues, for though the crime of the sky may be circumvented, yet the law remaineth the law, as in spirit as in letter. Excuse me. The Orchid Transfigurations, A Feast, a compilation of quasi-Rosicrucian allegories, supposedly by Robert Flood. This is in the original Latin. The illustrations are certainly striking. They flush the skin and glow beneath the eyelids after the book is closed. We must devour to be devoured. We cannot be undevoured as we cannot be unborn. Intuition? You just know, you know? The Locksmith's Dream, Portions and Proportions, the second volume of Teresa Galmier's examination of parallels in the mystic dreams of artisans. The frontispiece has been slashed with a razor. In this volume, Galmier records fewer dreams and explicates more on her own elaborate theories. We see this again and again. What is below can't escape what is above. The finest artisans all dream of the white door in the end. I'm no artisan, only a scholar. I think there's a secret that all these artisans know, but I think that secret is only half the story. So this is sufficient to level up sharps, but let's make sure that I have a place for... Yeah, so the regrets don't really help me now. Lady Ava's Repose, a meditation on the drowning of Lady Ava de Wolf and her 2 grandchildren, written in the years when the estate was abandoned... Oh, hang on, no, this will go to Disciplines of the Hammer, so we're good. And her 2 grandchildren, written in the years when the estate was abandoned by Father Theo, once the de Wolf family chaplain, one of the few to remain on the isle in those desolate years. There are so many stories of her heritage, so many rumors of her persistence. We might easily choose to believe that the grand twins escaped, even that they live yet beyond the sea. Father Theo has come to believe that Ava sought an escape from a family curse, the pale heritage of Haffren, her forebearer, or the curse placed upon her the line by the cunning man Red William in the time of Hendrik de Wolf. He had begun by believing neither curse was real, but as the book concludes, he decides that he is determined to believe in them rather than accept the 3 deaths as a futile tragedy. One does not so easily escape the long necessity of faith, he concludes. Regret, every choice has its shadow. All right, the time of division in which Amira Zahara prophesies the events later known as the Intercalate, when the hour called Sun and Splendor will be divided. Excuse me. The sun will be divided that it might not sire children. Still, its children shall be 4 in number, and its children shall be 7 in number, and its children shall also be numberless. The numberless shall open the way for the 7, and the 7 shall consume the 4. Amira prophesies 4 great wars before the second dawn, when the sun and splendor shall rise again. She cautions, sunrise is blood, and I foretell now that the sun shall rise from blood, yet not the color of the blood, nor the hour of night. She includes a rite that she speculates will be necessary for the second dawn. Pattern, something fits just right. Okay, so on its own, I would just take the fear here and call it a day. However, I have committed to Torg's Cleansing, and Torg's Cleansing only gives me an edge. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take a look rather quickly. So if it's surgeries and exsanguinations, the obvious candidate here would be to remove the pattern, because I can use that to knock to be able to level that up. So let's queue up the next batch of books. So if it's surgeries and exsanguinations, it's heart and knock. So we have 2 what was it? 2 of the 5 already. So we can get the Stolen Secret again. In fact, I can also use the Secret Threshold in this case. Trying to remember. I'll try the William Midnight one. Okay, so that brings us up to 2, 4. So we just need 1 more for surgeries and exsanguinations. I'll use Fet in this case. And I think Salt will do the trick. So the Crossing to Noon. So that's got me covered as far as my first batch of, or my next batch of memories are concerned, but obviously we want to use all the desks when we can. I also don't remember what the Velletri interviews gives me. That gives me Stolen Secrets. Okay, so it's a little too late for that. So Great Signs and Great Scars. So that's actually going to involve more Nock and some Grail in this case. So I should try and gear my reading accordingly. I don't think we're going to... Ooh. I think it'd be a little premature for me to read a Nock text, actually. But we can get the satisfaction. I think I've sort of worked myself into a little bit of a corner here. Oh, Gossip actually will work. But I think Gossip we now have at the Calcite altar. Yes. So I think we're on to 3 out. Flowers have the tree. And I'm actually starting to lose the plot a little bit. I think it won't hurt to get a beguiling melody, but I think it's a little much for me to try for anything else. I could try and I suppose I could try and get some more Forge stuff, but let's just focus on the beguiling melody for now. So I think we're Intimations of the Skin or the Wind's Ruin. I'll split the difference and go for the Morphe Codex. And metal will do in this case. Okay. So I'm going to need to mind my timers a little bit here, but I think we'll be fine. Alright, Serena Blackwood herself forged this key. I'm tired of losing it, she said. Alright, so first things first, we are going to level up Sharps. For that, it's really a question of what I have most readily available, and in this case, I think that'll be the metal. So again, remembering that Torg's Cleansing is going to be the one that finishes off Menace Gate Reflections. After that, we're going to read The Messenger Awaiting Her Destination and Doran Wall. I might even try and get a little bold with it and go even higher, but... Alright, an afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers to the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. Now, there was one other thing I was thinking that I could do, and this is something I could have done a little bit earlier. But we are getting a little bit of a collection of Encastaminx, and I do have a Newman. Is this what my house in real life looks like? It's good to see you again, Starbright Knight. The only difference is that all of the books have shelves in this, and I live in an apartment, so it's not as big. There are definitely books all over the place, but the books are... yeah. The books are... in diverse places. So yeah, sorry, I was thinking that maybe I would try and take a look at maybe not the histories that I could write, but maybe some of the options that I could write in the journal. But of course, I need a desk for that, so we'll wait it out a little bit. Yeah, it's big. Excuse me. It's bigger on the inside. But Happy New Year to you. I'm really happy to see you here. I don't know if you've seen me play this before or not, but if you have any questions, it is not an easy game, but it is to me, it's a very interesting one. So I'm always happy to explain. Sharps, knives, dangers, and things out of place. You have not seen this game. Have you ever seen the game Cultist Simulator, out of curiosity? Cool. So the short version of this is, I'm actually quite late game in this. But essentially, you play the librarian of Hush House. This is a fictional library that exists somewhere in Cornwall. And on your way to tend the library, which has apparently been abandoned in a fire 7 years before, there is a storm. Sorry, I'm sure you've noticed I'm not 100%. But there's a storm that breaks your ship, and you wash up on St. Brendan's Cove. So the tutorial for the game is basically figuring out how to get from St. Brendan's Cove to someone who you know in the village, Brankrug. And a very large part of the game at the start, sort of you unlock parts of the village, but really what you wind up doing is you wind up opening parts of the house. All of these rooms are sort of locked behind. And the idea here is that you're repairing the house. That's your first job as the librarian. But as you go through, you start finding out a little bit more about the house's history and the inhabitants. So, as an example, the Watchman's Tower, the first floor. The notorious Ava de Wolf, first and last Baroness Brankrug, liked this room because this side of the house carried fewest memories of her poor father Valentine, so she could eavesdrop on the conversations of visitors waiting below, or just because of how the pale light slanted through the windows in the last days of winter. And this is an example of a baronial period room. So in the 16th century, the de Wolf family became the Barons Brankrug, governing the Isle as their personal estate until 1759, when their line ended in madness and death. And then you sort of go through, and then you run into the Curia period. In the 18th century, a secretive cabal of scholars established the Curia of the Isle to manage Hush House, making it a haven of knowledge until 1896, when a disgraced librarian brought the house to penury. And in fact, some of the details you'll find will be Thirza Blake, 7th librarian of the house, extended this space, decorating it with semi-precious materials and filling it with the finest art Hush House's money could buy. Of course, after her enthusiasms brought the house to the brink of penury, much of it had to be sold off. Queen. So what happens after the Curia? The Lesser Bridge. Brankrug Jail, built in 1896 at the behest of Nocturnal Branch to contain troubles unseemly and occult. A mere 6 years later, after the Ortuccio incident, the branch itself came to be considered unseemly and occult, and its functions were absorbed into the Suppression Bureau, but the jail still stands. Over the gate is the Bureau's motto, Alice si licit, tibi non licit, commonly rendered as, "It is permitted to us, it is not permitted to you." The Nocturnal Period. By the beginning of the 20th century, an unwise librarian's enthusiasms had brought Hush House to penury. Nocturnal Branch, later the Suppression Bureau, stepped in to offer an arrangement. Hush House received funding, but submitted to yearly inspections, and also surrendered a portion of the Isle for the branch's prison. And then there is the Dawn Period as well as the Solar Period, which are they're looking at periods before the baronial period. But so you have a few different figures, right? You've got Thirza Blake, who was a librarian before you. You have Ava de Wolf, a baroness. You have concepts known as the Nocturnal Branch and all of it. And there winds up being a very special role that these entities known as branches of the Watchman's Tree wind up playing. Speaking of trees, there is also the Tree of Wisdoms, in which you can take all of your different skills and commit them to the tree and sort of have a bit of a worldview represented for your character. So it's a game that very much plays like reading a book. A lot of it happens inside of your head, and there's lots of sort of mysteries to sort of pull on the thread on. But it's a very, very interesting game, so that's why I've been spending so much time with it lately. All right, the cleansing has left my skin burning, my teeth throbbing. The chorality rumbles beneath the membranous surfaces of the waking world. So here's a good example here, too. The game will very often introduce terms that it doesn't necessarily explain right away. But I can tell you, for instance, that the chorality is sort of this engine that powers the world. And it is sort of this great rivalry between two entities known as ours, the Colonel and the Watchman. And you'll see quite a few different references to that, depending on the books that you read. Torg's cleansing. The librarian, Natalia Brulot, learned this powerful, if unpleasant, technique from the priest and edgelong Reverend Torg. All right, so we'll go to the consider verb, and we will add the Menascate reflections. So, disciplines of the hammer. And I guess I have to employ my metal here. So, satisfying to have come so far. Improve the skill to level 5. So making pretty decent progress towards the leveling the skills that I wanted. I could also be exploring things like Crowcross Sands, but right now I kind of want my Elements of the Soul generating memories for me. I don't really need any materials for the next little while. The goal right now is to get all the lessons from the Salon dealt with, and then we can start making some progress on our remaining books. Okay, Deaths and Their Evasions. Father Stanislav John Schaller writes of the means and limitation of passage between the orders of the Mansus. No long names, hours. Unusually, Father John has written this book in Fusine for, he says, especial secrecy. So, what is Fusine? A people lived east of the lost lake Fusino. Horace warned that theirs was the land of witches. This was their language, called by some the dry tongue, and by others the tongue of witches. So they're both. So these trees are outdoors. But here we've got St. Brendan's Cloister. Open air, the birds and the seasons can both freely visit this place. The sisters and brothers at the Abbey built these gardens in the 13th century at the height of the period we now call Solar Gothic. Walk here a while and breathe the peace they left. Likewise here, these are gardens. So the Scent Garden, this too dates from the Abbey, but in summer neither sisters nor brothers were permitted to spend more than a single hour here lest the temptation of savours overwhelmed them. I rather like this one. So this Practic Garden. In the early days of St. Brendan's Abbey, the brothers practiced the arts of war here. So it was in the baronial times, the garden became a favorite of the martial, quarrelsome de Wolfs. You also have some descriptions of the various objects. So the Practic Garden dummy. Since the Napoleonic War, he has been punched, thumped, stabbed, and shot by amateurs, by professionals, and by tipsy guests after dinner. No wonder he looks so cross. Also, I'll note here that we've got Brian de Wolf, who is mentioned later on in the game. But yeah, so in terms of sort of gardens, we've got these. This is a bit of a special one, the Physic Garden. The nuns of the Knot planted this garden of healing herbs in the Dawn period. Natan of Regensburg and Gideon de Wolf both expanded it, and the Curia of the Isle tended it. Even the branch and the bureau made use of it in the grim days that Brandkrug served as a prison. This contains a little bell, so this was added in the House of Light expansion. So you normally with these can host a salon. So you'll have guests who visit the library looking for knowledge, but you now have the ability to invite people to come to the house and you can have up to 5 guests, as well as a special role known as the Secretary Persistent, which we will likely not see because I started playing this in the beta, which didn't have a role for the Secretary Persistent. But in any case, this one's a bit special in the sense that once a season, you can actually invite people for lunch in the garden. Other outdoor areas, there's a well, there's a vegetable garden. And then this kind of counts here, the Gulskrai Logia. When this counts as a baronial period room, but when Baron Valentine's melancholia and his accusis became too much to bear, he began to take his meals here, with none of those sounds that he found troubling. Only the wind, the sea, and the cries of his beloved birds. After the de Wolfs were gone, the librarians of the Curia would come here when they needed to think in peace. This would also be sort of comparably outdoor Gulskrai Tower summit. In 1721, Valentine fell or leapt from the tower top. There were no witnesses, and his body was not found for 3 days. His daughter Ava was the last to see him alive, and of their last conversation, she would only say that he had begun to fear the sun. So, and then there's also the gull colony. But yeah, basically you kind of have a cutaway from the for the house, so you kind of get to see the room. But in these cases, these would be thought of as being inside the library. All right. This is Deaths and Their Evasions by Schaller. He speaks very cautiously of the exceptions that can sometimes be made to the edicts of Chancel and Calyptra, and hints at the means by which he successfully returned a lantern long to flesh. Schaller mentions most cautiously of all that he has been permitted to see a book that speaks more deeply on the matter, but that it was surrendered into the shadow of a covenant stone of the Watchman's Tree. It can be retrieved if the 99th wink is reserved under the edict's liminal. On the matters and deeds of serpents. This was probably the Prophecies of the Naga rendered into English and illustrated by William Midnight in Paris in the 1880s, but it shows a number of divergences from that text. It's certainly quite recent by the standards of VAC texts. The serpent folk called the Great Hooded Princes came to know the order called the House of Leith and warred across the miles with them. They made an alliance with the mother of ants whose children they had been. The text describes how the Great Hooded Princes escaped, or will escape, from the Fifth History where they had died or were doomed to die. They engaged in secret conquest of the land of the Great River, called India in some histories, and have ensured that all other conquests of that land are false conquests. A secret threshold. It's not easy to draw our own doors, but it's not impossible. 3 flowers hath the tree. I will note, for the benefit of Starbright Night and people who might be seeing this for the first time, the colors of this tree change. There's also a reference to another tree nearby, but Ernestine Peterhans records her observations of the growths of trees and the flowers around the isle, and the omens and portents she attempts to draw from them, particularly the yew tree in Earl Brian's meadow, whose flowerings are sometimes eccentric. Ernestine observes that in years when the tree flowers black, troubling secrets arise. When it flowers red, war and fires follow, and that no de Wolf heir has ever been born in a year when it flowers white. Ernestine attempts to use the tree's growths to advantage in her business affairs, but it fails. She is evidently very concerned when Hendrik de Wolf's grandson Giles runs off with a pale trollop half-run in a year when the tree flowers white. She begins to fear that she has entirely misinterpreted all the relevant omens. She is deeply concerned for the continuation of the de Wolf line and prays for Giles' return. Excuse me. So, speaking of the trees, Earl Brian's Field. Brian is another one of those leitmotif names that recur all through Bran Krug's long histories. This one was Brian of Brittany, who was named Earl of Cornwall by King William after the conquest. In 1068, the sons of the deposed King Harold mount raids on Cornwall, and Brian funds the construction of a fortified gate and the Watchman's Tower, initially in wood, to protect the abbey. In return, the abbey gives shelter to a yew tree he's brought from Brittany that flowers in diverse colors. This is that tree, hollow now and rotting slowly from within, taking its time to die gracefully. It is not flowered in living memory, and the colors of its flowers cannot now be told, but Brian's brothers were called Alan the Red and Alan the Black. The Earl's Yew. Since the conquest, this has been waiting for you. The irreverent might even call it a yew tree. The Morphe Codex, a priestess of the Sisterhood of the Knot, claims to have discerned the true meaning of the Thunderskin's birth. The writer credits the Red Grail, the Ring Yew, and the Horned Axe, the powers the Sisterhood reveres, with agreeing a final treaty between the Hours of the House and the Hours they displaced. The Thunderskin loved the Yew, and the Grail destroyed him, as restitution for the slaying of the Horned Axe's brothers and sisters. The Thunderskin entered the Manses through the Peacock Door, a privilege never given to the Witch and Sister, but then their merit was much less. The writer admits that entry through the Peacock Door is unseemly, but insists that under the circumstances there was no other way. I need at least one more heart or knock. The Crossing to Noon, the mystic Garcia Sauri gives a picturesque account of the adventures of Franklin Bancroft, Prince of Wines, and Ava de Wolf, the Pale Lady, on their way to the hidden island of Noon. For a long time, the Blackbone pondered her next move, until the moon dared to peep from behind a cloud, and the prince completed the composition of his third sestina, but the lady met the blind gaze of its open pores, waiting for the tide. Garcia Sauri acknowledges in an epilogue that it is widely known that Ava in fact tragically drowned herself and her twin infant granddaughters without ever making such a journey. But, he adds contemptuously, it is also widely known that the city unbuilt will so remain, that only one history is ever written, and that Janus is a Mansus prank. So that was the fifth that I needed there. And Callicite Supplications, prayers addressed to the Red Grail by the Sisterhood of the Triple Knot. If we should remember not, let our children remember in their redmost dreams. One prayer describes how sufficient Grail aspect can be used with Tridesma Hyra writes to give life, a little life to a doll twisted from fabric. Satisfaction. All right, so let's get some leveling done. Oh, I've got 1.1 seconds before I work on that. I think I'm just going to give this a second to let everything sync up again. The skill is now level 5. Its power aspects have also increased. Disciplines of the hammer. To purify and combine the selves and the essences. The hammer shapes gates and shatters doors, within us and without. Okay. So this is, you could also think of this game a little bit as a role-playing game. So you've got what would kind of count as attributes here. These are elements of the soul. The human soul is composed of 9 elements, and this is one. Most other things have simpler souls. Each soul card can be used once a day for the kinds of things you do with your soul. This usually means talking to people or crafting. You can level them up, so this is a higher-powered whist as opposed to the normal whist that I have here. But there's 9 parts, so if you're into Egyptian mythology, you may recognize at least. It sort of rhymes. It's not exactly drawn from Egyptian mythology, but it's not completely irrelevant either. So these would kind of count as attributes. And then these are skills, and they are called skills. So if you want to level up a skill, you need a lesson, which you get from reading a book. You can also get memories from books. And if you want to advance your skill to higher levels, you need as many memories as your current level of that skill. So that's still better than they didn't completely ignore Egypt when making Stargate. So, but you're probably not going to get elements of the soul or the parts of the soul from Stargate. Excuse me. Sorry. So in this case here, I want to be leveling up surgeries and exsanguinations. So with this, I'm going to need an element of the soul that has got heart or knock. So I think my core is a little bit of a... Actually, we also have shaft, so... shaft, eloquence, and understanding. The door opens both ways. So I need a lesson. Now that lesson needs to have heart or knock, so we add that here. And because I'm leveling it up from level 5 to level 6, I need 5 memories. And one of the things that really appeals to me is that this is a little bit like knowledge in the real world, right? Like, I'm actually kind of curious, Starbright Knight. I mean, I've known you for a little while on Twitch, and I've watched your stream. I felt like the majority of time I spent on your stream was always Marbles on stream, although I know you haven't... I don't think you've played that in a while, at least. I haven't been here. I've been there if you've played Marbles on stream recently. But the but yeah, you know, there's a number of things that I would say. Yeah, okay, good. I, I, I always feel like I'm taking my life in my hands whenever I talk about what people do and don't play, because I don't have a lot of time for Twitch. So I would feel really terrible if it was like, yeah, I don't think you've played such and such recently. They're like, what are you talking about? I played it yesterday. I was online when you were streaming. Why didn't you host me? I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. But yeah, like, we all have varying degrees of skill in, or they said, what is that game? Oh, yeah. Sorry, 1 second. But, you know, some people would be good at, you know, repairing a cell phone. Other people might, because they don't want to pay the cost of, you know, replacing glass, they might be tempted to try and do some sort of self-repair. But obviously, the going from expert to an even higher level of knowledge is a different thing than first learning, you know, how to open up an iPhone without working for Apple, for instance. So I like the way that the game models this, because basically it's harder to level up, and you actually need to draw from more dispersed sources, right? Because to me, I've always sort of felt... I'm really sorry about this. I may take a small break after the day in game is done. But basically, whenever I've run into a real expert on something, they do really seem to be able to draw from a nice wide field of things, and they all bear on their area of expertise, but they it's clear that they are drawing from sometimes experience, things that have happened to them, or at the very least a broader understanding than somebody who is at the start. I realize that that's almost kind of a definition, right? Like, people who are more experienced or people who are smarter know more. But what I mean is that there's just a number of different things which you, at the surface level, may not think are relevant to the skill that they draw from, and it makes complete sense. Yeah, that's one way of thinking of it. So in this case here, like I said, I've talked about this a few times, but I actually really do sort of like the model of knowledge that that this game has. So much so that everybody gets to hear me rant about it. All right, at last, I am something of an authority in this. Now, I was talking about wanting to try something here, so let's just, I've got metal at a fairly high level. So if I take Ambrose's desk, so we can take, I'm trying to remember my highest level forge. I think it can't be preliminal meter. Is it really transformations and liberations? No, it's got to be Anbury and lapidary. No? Well, I'll be. Might want to use Edge as an alternative example then, but let's go with Forge. So we've got Bells of Ease. Can take a higher level metal. So I've got plenty of Orpiment Exultant. So Orpiment Exultant, the Castum Terminale of the Fourth History. It's in the incandescent orange of Forge. One ingredient, it's been, as it were, long rumored, is the blood of candescence. Certain Masonic and related traditions venerate what they call OE. So we will add that. Use an Encastum ink with your journal to make determinations and record histories. If the hours listen, the world changes. So this is crafting. But if I take my journal, which is a very special book in this game, I probably should describe what my character is. So, Silverbound Journal. I was rich, but something was missing. I am no longer rich, and still something is missing. Hush House is a place of conclusions, and here, as librarian, I may find mine. The Magnate came to the house to conclude a history where they will find peace, but you can complete the game by recording any history. You might wish to begin your studies with the Hushery Wisdom. So, and then you have a description, Memories the Magnate, I've lived too long, but I'm not ready to die. I've tasted everything, and it wasn't enough. Give me silence, give me peace, give me the peace of snow. So here we are making a determination. I believe I need 25 to be able to... That's such a pain, because I'm this close. I'm actually curious, can I get away? I think if I use Edicts Martial... well, I'll get a couple of these things out of the way. So first of all, make a determination, red the first flower. The Watchman's Tree is the covenant that forbids knowledge to mortals, but permits it in the covenant houses of the tree, like Brankrug Isle. The red flower of Calyptra, the fire fueled by truth, was its first defense. Fire consumes knowledge, but fire also gives light. The tree is rooted in paradox. Adds Forge and Rose to your journal, replaces any other first flower determination. Adding determinations to your journal makes it first possible, then easier to write a matching history. So just give me a second here. Ah, heck. We can try something with Edge. I think we need to make a determination. I don't think you can go without making a determination, but I don't think I've ever tried, so I'm curious now. And actually, if I could get something that's at 10, that would be even better, but I don't think I have a 10 Rose. Nope. And I don't think I have a 10 Edge. So metal and Arab are basically the same there. But I guess the big question is, do I have the Edge ink? It's the one that I don't have. Oh no, of course I do. Really can't. Come on. It's just on a different shelf. We're still at 24. Interesting. I feel like I should be able to push this past without making it... Or does the math work? So I don't think I'd be able to do it with my existing resources, but I do at least get to take a look. Yeah, no problem, Starbright Knight. Thank you for stopping by. Okay, make a determination. Speech the sword. Language is a weapon. With language we breached the Mansus. Without language we could not have fought wars. Without language we would still be apes, beetles, stone. Excuse me. Adds Edge and Grail to your journal. Replaces any other speech determination. Adding determinations to your journal makes it first possible, then easier to write a matching history. Okay. So I might as well see what the last of these are, and we can put Rose in here, so... I think Preliminal Meter's as good as any. And Porphyrine, which we should have at least one of. Oh! Interesting. So yes, we do actually have enough to... I guess... Yep. Alright, to Yeez Beyond the Wave. This history is my last and greatest work. Ys will be the city we've dreamt of, and its bells will ring out again across the seas. When the librarian records a history, even the hours take note. Making this decision cannot be reversed. It will begin the end game. It's a little premature for that. Remembering, I've already decided that I'm going to be picking between either a Final Understanding or that old Lost Music. So we now know the Rose component. So the ones that I'm most interested here are Rose Sky, Rose Sky, Winter, and Scale. Again, depending on the circumstances. So it is nice to know one of the options. Sorry, I should be writing these down. So, determination, speech, the key. Language is the key. It was language that opened the doors of the Mansis. Without language, we could have had no peace. Without language, we would still be beasts, worms, mud. Adds Rose and Sky to your journal, replaces any other speech determination. Adding determinations to your journal makes it first possible, then easier to write a matching history. Okay. So the goal here isn't necessarily to write the history. This is just a night. It's convenient for me to be able to work with, but I did learn a couple of things out of that. Okay, excuse me. So I'm gonna just erase my old notes here. So we're gonna use Horns and Ivories to level up Great Signs and Great Scars. Now, Great Signs and Great Scars requires... Where are you? That only requires 4, and that's a Grail and a Knock. So we've got 3. We actually just need 1 more. And then Spices and Savors will be Door and Wall. Door and Wall also requires 4. So, in practice, I think the easy answer here is we go for the last Grail with Horns and Ivories, and then Door and Wall we can use up all the Knock if we want. So I'm going to want at least 1 Grail for... I'm going to want 1 Grail to level up or Element of the Soul, rather. 1 Arab to level up Great Signs and Great Scars. Gossip, Beguiling Melody, and Satisfaction. Now, the funny thing is, I actually think that's it for Grail for us. So we've got the Gossip here. Beguiling Melody is my usual safety option. Probably not worth spending too much time on. So with that in mind, I'll maybe grab 1 of the salt and then, or actually, yeah, no, salt makes sense. Death of the Moon, Kilisimi. Moon the Cycle. I've already mastered this, but I could reread it and perhaps recall a memory. Okay, so that's the last one that we wanted for the 4 for this. So now we're focused entirely on Forge and Grail. And because desks are kind of interesting for me to hold on to, what I'm going to start with is using the phonographs. So this one, we can use Knock, Moon, Heart, and Sky. So we can use a Faust in this case. And this would be a good example. We've got the Velletri interviews, which will give me Stolen Secrets. So I've already mastered this, but I could reread it and perhaps recall a memory. Now, the challenge is for Door and Wall, I don't think we have a Knock and Forge. I don't think we have a recording that'll get me the Knock and Forge that I need. Because I believe these 2 give me Confounding Parables. We have a Cheerful Ditty, a Beguiling Melody, and Fear, none of which are relevant to a Forge and a Knock. So But that's fine. We've freed up at least one desk. Okay, moving on. We can do another secret threshold. So this one would be a manual for departure. Following that, we can use... Okay, actually, first of all... Okay, so that was 4. 1, 2... 3. Am I going crazy? No, that should be actually be 4. Okay, let me just double check here. So, 1 required here. 1, 2, 3. I am going crazy. Okay. I've got 1, 2, 3. 4 desks going. Okay, so I do need at least 1 more. Did I read by their marks? You should know them. Okay, cool. Sorry. Bancroft Diaries it is. Okay, so that should cover me for the books that I wanted to read. We'll put the shop down for Door and Wall. What this means now is that I'm going to start working on the book that I wanted to, which was the one I would have read had I had the VAC. I should have thought of that at the time. So that's fine. We'll wait it out. I'm thinking, because we're starting to think a little bit about determinations now, it may not be a bad idea for me to start making some of the different inks. So let me just double check. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, okay. Oh, sorry, that's Perinculate, isn't it? Yeah. But Uzalt's here. So we've got Maricat, Porphyrine, Orpiment Exultant, Uzalt, Nilicat. So 1, 2, 4, 5. So I was gonna say I should make any of the remaining inks. I think we're just gonna wait. I could maybe do some. I could maybe make some food, but I still prefer using the elements of the soul to level things up. Better now. So I think the real consequence is going to be we won't have quite as much to... we won't have quite as much to level up, or sorry, to... we won't have as much space to get what we need. The skill is now level 6. Its power aspects have also increased. So yeah, basically, I'm not going to be able to get quite as many skills leveled up as I would have if I was able to start reading the book right now, but we can still prep for the lessons I'm going to be getting out of the messenger awaiting your destination. And then once we start using the Bells of Ys, in fact, I can start reading the follow-up. Let me just take a minute here. So... let's read back into balance. Oh, but that's going to need Kill a See Me. Or is it? Sky in the Scar? No, it's Weaving the World that comes out. Okay, yeah, we will read The Sky in the Scar. This is just to prep me for my next next Newman. All right, so in 5 seconds we'll be able to read the book I actually want to read. Okay, Deaths of the Moon, a historical tract on various forms of survival after death. When the heart no longer beats, the Grail may keep the spirit in the body, and an appetite is indicated to sustain. Alukites are the best known, but not the only of this nature. This is the waning moon mode. The full moon mode is the intensification of one element of the soul to a point where ordinary sustention is unstable. Our protector, the generous of hosts, began of this nature, and its generosity remains ungentle. It is possible for the body's health or the heart's core to outpace the other elements, so that a static mode becomes impossible, and growth proceeds in dramatic stages until balance remanifests. Sea Spray, Depth, Sorrow. So we'll use that right away. So satisfying to have come so far. Meanwhile, a manual for departure. The author, who identifies itself as the Jekadu, claims to be one of the great hooded princes of the land of the river. The style is informal, even chatty. No, these doors shouldn't be recorded, but if we had only recorded things before we'd had to leave the Fifth History, we would be in a much better state. So here I am writing it down, and if you don't like it, you can sanction me. The Manual for Departure lists a number of strategies, occult, martial, and political, for quick escapes. Many are irrelevant, obsolete, or enigmatic, but the manual does include a number of powerful techniques for opening portals. The Velletri interviews. Interrogation of a man named Lacombe, a former Nocturnal Branch inspector now identified as terminally robogoid. Lacombe is not especially lucid, and the state called robogoia evidently includes a malady of the lungs which causes coughing fits. He weakens audibly over the course of the interrogation. He is questioned about the disposition of various unsanctioned items recovered from a Nocturnal Branch raid on a castle at Artuccio in the region of the Fucine Marshes. He is, however, defiant as well as incoherent. Lacombe insists that the items have been put to good use. He derides Nocturnal Branch as the lackeys of Calyptra. Alarmingly, during the last few minutes of the interrogation, he begins to insist that his interrogator should burn the library. He waxes enthusiastic about the fire he wants to see, leading to a final coughing fit, after which the interview abruptly ends. By their marks ye shall know them. A monster hunting initiate of the hour named the Colonel, who identifies herself as Little Sophia, provides advice on finding the weak spots of Long. Hello, Hisley the Fox. Hello, Happy New Year to you. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you're doing well. Little Sophia observes dryly, should one desire to slay an immortal, it is most practical to do so before they become immortal entirely. She details the marks, the changes that Long undergo as they abandon their mortal condition. As the lantern Long begins to abandon its flesh, its skin becomes loose, its bones soften. The sixth mark is to be observed thus, when the flesh between the finger and the thumb can be pulled to the final finger joint. And then one more memory. Bancroft Diaries. Lord Franklin Bancroft was initiated into the arts of the flower maker by the Rose Witch Fiona Ayrshire. He rose to become a society provider of occult services and secret pleasures before his abrupt disappearance in 1790. Bancroft seems to have been a talented adept, but devoted his energies to frustratingly whimsical projects, arranging grape-fetching races between Mansa spirits, teaching percussagants to juggle, and conjuring storms of imaginary blossoms for the Rose Witch Ayrshire, who resolutely refused ever to couple with him. Bancroft spends 20 pages bemoaning this last. The mantra here recorded is a high and exacting magic which can be used to pledge one's spirit to the watchman, beginning an ascent to the house. Bancroft boasts of his ability to recite it when in his cups. He also had it set to music for a performance with fireworks at Vauxhall Gardens. Okay, so I did want to read the manual for departure, or not the sorry, messenger awaiting your destination. Actually, that I'm going to need to be a little more careful about, so we'll use the top metal. Bells of Ease. I can do it. Oh, right. Right. I made life interesting for myself. I think Caller's Desk is the answer. And again, I apologize for the coughing. So that is Vac. It is not Lupus. How are you doing, Algrins? Alright, I can master this mystery in a forge to match Mystery Forge, and we are one more than we need. But I actually don't think I have a spare metal, so there we have it. Still alive and kicking. Well, the same could be said for both of us, I suppose. It was good to see you. Okay, so it's door and wall. I think we kind of know where this is going, but... Alright, forge the kindled flame. I can master this mystery. So just so I can be sure, so this will be at level 5 when all is said and done. So we're currently leveling up Great Signs and Great Scars, which also has a knock, so I suppose we'll just take a look. Disciplines of the Hammer is 5, as is Spices and Savors. So yeah, I don't know. I think probably what I'll do here is we'll move Resurgences and Emergences down. So Spices and Savors becomes a 6, as does Door and Wall. So Forge and Knock. How do I want to do this? Okay, so we'll set aside a shaft. I think everything's kind of fair game at this point, so... So 1... I'm going to use the Adventures with Lacombe again. Two. Three. Four. Yeah, that's fine. Five. So now we focus on Forge and Nectar. I don't think there's any more forge. Let's do Damascene Traditions of the House of Leith, although I think I overdo that one. Say, I'm definitely going to want more... I'm definitely going to want more forge before too long. Excuse me. But I think I too am terminally robogoid. I think we're going to have to settle for that until we commit the memories. So the Songs of the Carapace Cross would be the next candidate. I don't think our tryst is quite enough to push that over the edge. So we've got 4. Actually, with a memory we can. An afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. It is spring, and the landlady has served me a slice of her stargazy pie, with the pilkered heads poking cheekily through the hot crust. And here it is, the Mirror of Melissenth, the daybook and dream journal of Abbess Melissenth, venerated as a saint and respected as an alchemist. We'll just keep this as the overflow for now. And yeah, at this point, I think we'll just we'll let things run by. I am rather eager to see the Newman, because that'll give me a little more intelligence in terms of where I can take my my finales. Excuse me. Hopefully you all can at least... Yeah, so I have not streamed for the past week, and hopefully everybody can appreciate what... Like, I realize this is probably not the most pleasant to listen to, and I do apologize for that. But yeah, I've been... I basically took... I had January 1st off, and then I took the 2 other days for myself. It's like the first vacation I've taken since getting this new job. Actually, it'll be a year at this job since January, but or end of January. But yeah, basically, as soon as I had my first day off, I started coughing and feeling miserable. So this is the lesson: never take a day off work. Alright, the Great Signs and Great Scars. Some glyphs are too obscure to reside in any language, but too potent to remain unwritten. For at worst, at least it's not goopy. The cough is heavy enough to be concerning, but also never smart enough to seek care of it. Yeah, it's So this is the most I have been coughing, like, in the last week, I think. But it's just because... like, it's the process of talking... Like, obviously my voice isn't 100% better, but it's basically just kind of the process of talking and sort of breathing in, that occasionally there'll just be like a bit of a catch in the back of my throat, and that's what'll provoke the coughing fits. So I'm actually fine. I'm feeling a little worse today because I basically didn't get a full night's sleep. And I actually also think it was probably the medicine that was making sure I was getting a proper sleep at the hour that I intended. But yeah, it'll be fine. Like, the thing I'm most worried about... Sorry. The thing I'm most worried about it is if I... because I did the stream tonight, what I'm hoping that doesn't do is I'm hoping that doesn't cause me to sort of regress, and then I put the recording of the videos for next week's YouTube videos on challenge. So just... If I'm really starting to feel like I'm pushing it, I might end the stream a little early. But I'm fine. Like, I would be quite surprised and disappointed if I wind up, missing work on Monday, let's say. All right, what was I gonna do? I think I was just gonna wait. Nope, I was gonna use spices and savors to level up door and wall. So satisfying to have come so far. I am, however, going to take a break once sundown in game comes. So this one I'm interested in for potentially histories. The Sky in the Scar, gnomic exhortations that might be described as emergency procedures for the return of the traveling kinds of the Carapace Cross. Each page of the book except the last bears a single sign, clear and irrefutable as a gem. The final page is empty. The traveling kinds of the Carapace Cross might never return. Back into balance, when the traveling Carapace kinds passed beyond the wave in the sky, they made arrangements for their return. There are histories where those arrangements might be invoked. Any librarian can use this to establish a history and complete the game, but the executioner and the revolutionary can win a particular victory. So I don't think there's that much I can do with this one here. I think there's a bit of an imbalance between the... well, actually... yeah, there is, just because of the skill that I'd want to use. But I kind of want to see what I can pull out of that. So we've got Forge, Edge, and Rose. So Heart, Sky, and Winter are three brand new determinations for this playthrough. All right, so we've got the Temptations of Architecture. The antiquarian and nyctodromist Ambrose Westcott writes of the dangers of doors, with particular reference to a house in the bounds named Treowyn. No doubt they have come to regret the ambitions of their winding stair, even now in Treowyn, a silver sea is unwisely visible from a rash window. Westcott explains that the wheel locks, the charge holders of Treowyn, have had recourse to dramatic measures to prevent oniric encroachment, removing the entire top floor of the building. Nevertheless, he writes, the business of the Moon Hall has begun to touch the other business of the house. Just Verse, a rare surviving copy of Christopher Olopoly's notoriously unsuccessful volume of experimental poetry published in 1912. Olopoly is clearly more interested in the occult than the aesthetic aspects of the work. By most measures, the rhymes are contrived, the meter inconsistent, the imagery banal. Still, even the worst verses have a compelling quality, and I find myself drumming my fingers on the desk to accompany their rhythms. In an afterword, Olopoly discusses mnemonic holometaboly, by which he seems to mean the sort of crafting process where memories, when fed into a preliminal meter technique in the presence of enough knock or rose, can blossom and fissure into more potent versions of themselves. Ava's Treasury. Ava DeWolf, last of the Brandkrugs, discusses the occult and aesthetic properties of jewels and other precious minerals. Black nephrite and scolecite for nowhere, orichalc and amber for yeas, amethyst for the night key of the spider door. Ava points out, bitterly, that there is no shortage of uplifting parables and proverbs about the saving graces of a flaw in a jewel, but that no one, not jeweler, nor priest, nor hour, has ever found a way to repair such a flaw. Damascene traditions of the House of Leith. The House of Leith was an order of immortals who sought obscurity, rejecting their past and future. If the author of this short text is to be believed... If the author of this short text is to be believed, the initiates of the Damascene branch were much more radical than their fellows elsewhere. The house generally forbade any potentially procreative activities for fear of the terrible consequences of too long bearing a child. The Damascene order took this much further. At one point, male initiates were required to undergo castration, and female initiates to strangle any children they had previously borne. The measures were so horrific that the order was shaken by repeated schisms, and eventually absorbed into the local Sisterhood of the Knot as a society of healers and exorcists. The Valetri interviews, we just read that recently, and I don't want to hear about about our friend Lacombe weakening over the course of the interrogation. It brings too much to mind. The 12 Letters on Consequence, Julian Cosley's epistolatory treatise on what may come after, addressed to his once friend Claude Hersault, the mystic and antiquarian. By the time he wrote these letters, Cosley was identified with the oneiropolitical Worms movement, and Hersault with the birds, meaning roughly that Hersault held the old order of the hours to be desirable, and Cosley held it to be oppressive. Many of Cosley's arguments about consequence and finality are couched in erudite and practical alchemical terms. Others appear to be thinly veiled threats directed at Hersault. Some are both. Alright, so I believe one of these is taking up the messenger awaiting her destination. That should be Caller's desk, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. Alright. So again, we've got back into balance sitting here, and we don't really have that much to do right now. So I'm going to take a minute and just get a little more information in terms of determinations that I can make. So for a start, quenchings and quellings. I think the health and the core are the same. So 3 and 3. Yeah. So with that, we take back into balance. I think it's Maricat. Why do I feel Maricat is wrong? Because it is. It's Grail. Orpiment? Yeah. Here we go. Alright, so this was 24. Make a determination. Horned Axe oldest. The horned axe bears 2 blades, permits passage when passage is to be permitted, waits at the threshold. The horned axe, who forbids contradiction, is the oldest hour. Other hours might seem older. They are not older. Adds heart and knock to your journal, replaces any other oldest determination. Adding determinations to your journal makes it first possible, then easier to write a matching history. Okay. Heart and knock are not directly relevant to what I need right now, so this is more of for curiosity. Now the big one is winter. Wait. Yeah, I keep forgetting this has winter. Alright, our old friend Nilicat. Gideon Soaks, huh? That's definitely what I'm using the 27 winter for. There will be no second dawn! This is the history where the traveling kinds of the Carapace Cross return, and everything changes. What is above, below. What has wings shall thrive. Make a determination. White, the first flower. The Watchman's Tree is the covenant that forbids knowledge to mortals, but permits it in the covenant houses of the tree, like Brankrug Isle. The white flower of Calyptra, the silence that is given, was its first defense. When forbidden knowledge is known, it must be forgotten. But to be forgotten, it must first be known. The tree is rooted in paradox. Adds winter and edge to your journal, replaces any other first flower determination. Adding determinations to your journal makes it first possible, then easier to write a matching history. Okay, so winter, first flower, and winter and edge. Finally, let's see what we can do with Sky. Now, I'm not optimistic about our chances with this, but this should do. So, Sacra Solace, I think, is my best Sky. Nope, Furs and Feathers. And as usual, the book. And I don't think Uzalt is the Sky one, but I could be wrong. It is the Sky one, my bad. Ah, yes, I forgot. This guy is the From No One one. Second Dawn, but third. I believe House of Light has added at least a few of those meals. Make a determination from nowhere origin. The Thriddage kind of the Carapace Cross dreamed themselves out of black glass to be their own monarch. If we inherit the empty throne, we dream ourselves into every night to come. Add Sky and Forge to your journal. Replaces any other origin determination. Adding determinations to your journal makes it first possible, then easier to write a matching history. Okay. I don't know if I want to make a full... I don't know if I want to make any choices on determinations quite yet. Right, so I guess the first thing I'm doing here, well, let's just wrap that up. Okay, so door and wall. The lock seeks its key, the wall seeks its door, and we who would pass learn at last that they are not our servants. So we've got the door and wall. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the memories, so we're good to go there. Spices and savors. So I suppose, so we've got the shaft here. So spices and savors is going to be a question of finding enough forge and nectar. So let's give it a shot. So we'll use the Arab here. Now under forge, that's a different question. We've already got the impulse. So pattern will do the trick here. So that's 2. Regrets will be 3. War of the Roads is 4. So at that point, I'm going to have to use the Earth sign, which is not the end of the world. What am I doing? I needed to, yeah, I needed a little more time on that. Okay, so that was dumb, but... Oh, in terms of the nowhere? Hmm. I'm just trying to think. I know a little more about the Carapace Cross. Like, I feel Dancer is probably the one that probably has a lot of Carapace details. I'm just trying to think how big the origin... Sorry, I'll try if there's something that I if there's something that sort of flags to me that there might be a potential spoiler, I'll try and flag that where I can. But I'm also either remembering or learning some of this for the first time too, so I'll do my best, but obviously no promises if I mess up. Well, I can sniff a plant. That'll also get me nectar. Investigate the object. You won't use this up or consume it by doing this. So if we're lucky, we might be able to get both of these leveled up by the end of the day. But I think a lot of this really depends on the order. Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. 5. The sense of awareness persists, but the plant remains immobile. Unsettling, but harmless. Doesn't even have thorns. So in 21 seconds, we'll be able to start leveling things up, and we'll only need 30 seconds after that. So, yeah, no, we should be able to handle it. Again, it's a completely boneheaded move for me to read Wrapped in the King at the time that I did, but that's fine. We'll get through it. I should maybe see if I can use Back into Balance to read a particular text. Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah. I should maybe see if I can use Back into Balance to read one of the more difficult texts on the ledge here, but I'll definitely be reading another Newman in a little bit. All right, the messenger awaiting her destination. Limian Burzgash records his prophecies of a city unbuilt and entreaties to its herald. The herald may never arrive at the city unbuilt. The city may never be built without the herald's message. The herald is finally identified as the 12th initiate of the House of Silence. The foundation stone will be taken from the House of Silence, Burgash suggests, to become the foundation stone of the city unbuilt. Oh, 3 Doran Wall. All right, that'll give me something to think about. And that's a pattern. Okay. First things first, level up Doran Wall. So if I'm focusing on Forge and Knock, yeah, I guess it's either Disciplines the Hammer or Great Signs and Great Scars. I think in this case I'll do Disciplines of the Hammer just because it's a little bit closer. I'm just doing this by order at this point. Okay, I don't think it's realistic to expect any more though, so I think we'll park it there. We'll wait for the remaining books to be read, obviously. But yeah, I think we're kind of sunsetting at this point. Although while I'm at it, so we've got Heart, Sky, and Winter. So I guess probably, well, the Mirror of Melisande is easy enough for me to read. But the Origins of the Hours, I bet, will benefit from... Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, never mind. We can read that already. Oh wait, what am I saying? I've already put it in here. Okay. Yeah, so we'll read Origins of the Hours tomorrow. And then I can work on another Newman text. Right, The Radical Measure, a manifesto for experimental and dangerous-sounding invocatory poetry written sometime in the 19th century by Dr. Aaron Peel, a notoriously inconsistent and incoherent text, apparently produced in a tearing hurry. The Hours have little time for poetry, Dr. Peel avers, but they have a tremendous amount of time for poets. As the rose opens, Dr. Peel explains, an enduring memory opens to the horizon. This is a way of saying something that cannot otherwise be said, and is best only written with one's eyes firmly closed. The Amalgam of the Red Rose, an account by Mistress Redflower of the alchemical traditions favored by the House of Lancaster and identified with the Sunset Road. These operations ultimately led to their victory in the War of the Roads, but are described as now debased. The generals of the houses of Lancaster and York are described as brother enemies, a term more usually associated with the dyadic invariably twinned Edgelong. The author's conclusion is that in the absence of the operations of the Dawn Road, the operations of Sunset inevitably became unbalanced, debased, and ultimately enfeebled. The combination of the two is described tantalizingly as the Forge's true alloy. Okay, Wrapped in the King. This is just replacing what we already have. Detailed accounts of secret bacchanals and ecstatic dances observed in necropolises and graveyards in southern Europe, in Egypt, and in Anatolia. The author is a self-confessed ghoul and eater of buried flesh. He claims to have witnessed the dances while at his feasting. The dances draw from the traditions of the mysteries of the cults of Isis and of Sybil, but include both symbolic and literal flayings, and the human heart is always central in the rites. The author punctuates his accounts with queasily sensuous descriptions of his own interrupted feasts. At these greater feasts, a black pig is always crowned as king before its slaying. On this occasion, its heart was weighed in a balance against a knot of feathers, and its skin became a cape for the officiant. Its flesh was left for the crows, but I must confess my interest was not in its carcass, but in the perfumed flesh of the milliner laid fresh in the earth. And the Barrowchild's Elegies. The Barrowchild, a Gaulish adept who won a place in the ranks of the Ordo Lamea, enumerates the great shadows laid to rest in the tombs of power and discusses their various conditions. The Barrowchild identifies numerous modes that are neither true death nor true life: the vitrification of the heart, the corrupt light of the wood, chorostasis, the wandering of the fet. The Barrowchild warns particularly of the avidity of tryst, where a remnant shadow's longing for change survives its sense of self and even devours its wist. That longing may draw the curious into the tomb, where the remnant shadow changes so that it cannot be distinguished from its visitor, or that the reverse becomes true, and that it is never again possible to say whether it is the shadow or the visitor that exits the tomb. Okay, so we're ready to level up Spices and Savors. We will want to work on Disciplines of the Hammer, but I don't think there's any benefit to me using the elements of this. Well, I guess we can get it done a little earlier if I use it. But then again, I'm also giving up some of my more powerful ones. So I think I'll just let everything rest overnight. I don't need to be in such a rush. Night has fallen, dawn will come soon. An afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. And here we go. The skill is now level 6. Its power aspects have also increased. Let's level up Spices and Savors before the night is done. And for that, I think we use the health. At last, I'm something of an authority in this. So the plan for tomorrow, we'll use Doran Wall to level up Disciplines of the Hammer. That's going to take a minute to get everything queued up. We'll also use Back into Balance to read the Origins of Hours. It may also be tempting to try and read the Mirror of Melisynth. Actually, you know what? If I think about it, this is one case where using the Faust might make sense, because if I take the Sunny Day, if I add that to, yeah, we could do Anbury and Lapdary, and a Faust. So basically I'm taking advantage of the weather today to get a head start on this reading. And then I do still want to use Back into Balance to read the Origins of Hours, so I'll have a few more lessons than I had anticipated. But we also still have a lot of time left in spring. And this is just an opportunity for me to make the most of some of the things that I already had access to. So, I'll be down one element of the soul for tomorrow, but that's, that's a price worth paying in this case. Skill's now level 6. Its power aspects have also increased. Okay. There's no sacrifice without sustenance. There is one other thing I want to look at. So, if I take a look at the skill, so Sky, I think, is going to be, excuse me, a question until. I think Sky's going to be a question until I start getting some determinations made in the journal. But I think we might be able to do something with scale, given that we have coil and chasm, and we also have the ++ health. It's not like a huge chance, but it's something that I think is worth exploring. So what I'm really looking for here would be scale, and then not forge, edge, rose, heart, winter, or sky. So our options here would be, so knock and winter. Well, we have the winter, but heart and moth. So again, we've already got the heart. Not as many scale options as I thought there might be. Okay. Still gives me something to start with. Like I said, I'll get the evening done, and then I'll have a bit of a break. I realize I don't have that much time left in the stream anyway, but I'm gonna try and make it through. All right. Excuse me. So. I do apologize. When I get back, we're going to take Doran. Actually, we'll get one thing queued up right away. So we can take back into balance. We'll add that with my higher level Faust, and we can add that with Sacrosolus Invicti. At which point we then add Origins of Hours. And that's a VAC text, correct? Yeah. Alright. I can master this mystery, enough sky to match Mystery Sky. So with those books, actually the other thing I can do is read the Inescapable Confinement. That'll require Eric Payne. Okay, so the overall plan for today, I have one more Doran wall than I was expecting. So what I'm going to do is get the memories that I need to level up Disciplines of the Hammer. I may want to consider adding a touch to my repertoire. After we've got that, the first memory that I'm going to get will be at least 2 sights and sensations. So basically, by the same sort of little algorithm we've worked together, we'd use sky and winter as sort of the determination. And it looks like here we've got Rhyme and Remembrance and Snowstorm, or sorry, Ragged Crossroads and Rhyme and Remembrance. So those will be the 2 that I level up first. So that'll mean sky, winter, and moon. And then following that, we're also going to be working on Origins of the Hours, so we may get 3 out of that one. In fact, it's very likely we'll get 3 out of that. So that's Sacrolemeo, which is Sky and Moth. So again, my Sky is all relatively high. So I think what'll be happening here, it looks like Resurgences and Emergences is going to be moving up to 6. Sacrolemeo will be going up to 7, and then Weaving and Not Working and Resurgences and Emergences will be going up to... Actually, you know what? No, we can do that slightly different. Excuse me. Resurgences and Emergences gets up to 6, but maybe we move up Watchman's Paradoxes, Sacrolemeo and Watchman's Paradoxes after. Or another option... I wasn't thinking of this, but this would actually be a more sensible thing to do. Sacrosolus Invicti's at 9. I should look for one of the 8s. Or no, hang on. That was the Foss that I was short on. So there's a couple where I'm missing a top level one. So like for instance, I don't think we have a top. We don't have like a 10 edge. Now I don't think I don't think Moth and Sky are going to get me what I need for edge, but I might want to consider the top end a little bit more when doing these. Anyways, between those 2 books that I'm going to be reading, there's a lot of lessons that I'm going to get. We'll see where we're sitting afterwards. We're now down to 6 new books to read. After that, I'm going to be, assuming that I haven't put the full effort in already, I'm definitely going to be directing my my next attention towards finding out what some of the determinations are and which ones line up with what I'm expecting for the overall story. But I'm going to take a small break. I'm going to try and get all the coughing out of my system. I'm probably going to get something to drink. I'll try not to take too long, but I am going to need to put the kettle on and otherwise just get everything set up. So if you have been sitting the whole time, or if you want to go up and have a stretch, or maybe get a glass of water, or otherwise do something else, now would be a great time to do so. I'll try to be back as soon as I can. But let's be real, I'm not feeling 100%, so I'm going to take my time to get my refreshment. But I will see you all in a little bit. All right, so welcome back, everybody. Thank you for. Things are leaving Game Pass. Oh no. I'm hoping some tea will, excuse me, help me out here. Mint tea, nothing with caffeine. But let's get to work on Dornwall. So, first thing we're going to do is. So, actually, I want to just double check the game plan. So, if it was Sights and Sensations coming in first, it was Rhyme and Remembrance and Snow Stories, I think. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Ragged Crossroads and... okay, so that's going to mean Disciplines of the Hammer. So I want to tilt this a little bit more towards Forge, but we can get both. So for instance, Contradiction would be a good thing for me to pick up. Okay, so let's start with the Shaft. So I'll go start at the bottom this time. So we've got... We'll do the Ascendant in this case. Actually, you know what? We've done... Yeah, no, we'll do the Ascendant. Probably use it more than once. That's one. Again, a bit Forge-oriented if I can. Oh, actually, there is one other thing that I can do. So if I take the Governor's Phonograph, so I'll use a health for that one, and if I use the recordings of the Althaban Abyss, we get a fear out of that, I believe. Okay, so that's 2... Now we can start focusing on the Forge. And at this point, it's not even a question of counting because we've already got so many desks already occupied. I'm really just trying to load up on what I can. Like we go back to Shape and Smoke. Iron Book requires Fusine, which we've already used. And I think... Okay, so we've already got the Edge. Yeah, I think we're out of 4G things. So it was Disciplines of the Hammer. It's Ragged Crossroads next. So that we can start getting some wintry things, and that I can use either the Book of the Extinguished... Let's do the... Oh no, we can't do Book of the Extinguished Heart because we don't have the... we don't have the language. Alright, so that'll get me the winter that I need. I can also afford to generate Torg's Cleansing. And that's before the weather. The only other thing I didn't do... Okay, actually, I'll touch a chair. But I was just thinking I should have also read a Newman text. Oh no, I'm already reading a Newman text. What am I saying? We'll use the Wisp for that. Investigate the object. Alright, so that should give us a pretty good start for the day's work. And the clouds will actually help me when it comes to either Rhyme and Remembrance or maybe Snow. I think we're going to do Rhyme and Remembrance. I'm trying to remember. Was it this one? Yeah, here we go. You can say the Magus of Quartz. Lingering repose, upholstered in a velvet of peculiar richness that invites the hand. Carved on the back by the maker, be with me a little while. Hearts and flowers have also been carved by an unauthorized but skillful hand. Alright, so shortly we should be getting our memories coming in. I'll maybe take a quick minute to... I'll take a minute to see if I can get any information from the Newman just for... I'm just trying to think where I might use it actually. Maybe... I don't know. But yeah, I'm trying to get my determinations in order just so I can have a better idea of what's going on. Zarok says, I think your fridge is running. Gotta go... very funny. I was wondering, it's actually one of the first times I hadn't seen you commenting on stealing the books when I was gone. I was actually going to say, so I know there were some questions about this in the subreddit, and I do recall in an early version of the beta, definitely, I believe they even had some aspects of untrustworthy visitors. So I get the impression that maybe like Daymare and Corso might have been examples of these, but I think there was going to be at some point a feature where visitors could steal books from the library. And I know this is one of the things, like, I don't want to say it's a room for improvement in Weather Factory games, but I do sometimes get the impression that there are some times where features are added because they are interesting as opposed to optimized. So, like, a decent example here will be, if you look at the subreddit quite a bit, you will see lots of... there's lots and lots of threads about what the best skill is. And then there's one where it's like, I'm mad that Swaddled Thunder is now a device because it means that, like, what is it, drums and dances is obviously the best skill, and, you know, weaving and not working is obviously the worst skill, and this makes, you know, the worst skill even worse. I'm sort of like, well, I don't really have a whole lot of time for the best skill, worst skill thing. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not completely neutral for it. Like, Edict's Martial I tend to bring to 10 just because after a couple of playthroughs, Edict's Martial is a very, very helpful skill, I find. And I do tend to notice that people have different ideas as to what the best skill is. So I think, I do think, I mean, in fairness too, like, I actually do think the kernel and the chorality is a pretty neat thing. Like, it's kind of funny that I prefer the kernel because the whole point is in fact the dyad, but leaving that aside, you know, I think probably Weather Factory is onto something if people have different ideas about what the best skill is, right? Actually, it was funny. It's totally on a different point, but I shared a Reddit post with someone, former coworker. I quite like this coworker. I feel he's underutilized where he was, but I think he's got a better group he's in now. But this one says, Asimov's Foundation is bad literature. I'll just read this thing because this is fun. Sorry if any of you wrote this, by the way. When I wanted to get into sci-fi, I looked into several recommendation lists, and Foundation always came pretty high on these lists. It's heralded a sci-fi classic, yet it is so bad that after reading it, I'm starting to challenge the general definition of classic as far as literature is concerned. At first, I thought it would be pretty easy to complete, because it is relatively short for a sci-fi novel. Just 70,000 words. I was hoping it would be fast-paced and cut right to the meat of the story without fluff and redundant description/world building. But no! I was wrong and bored to tears by the novel. Nothing happens for pages. 10,000 words, but just dialogue between characters about some future events or past events. Not much description of these characters. They all feel like talking heads, and since the story is told from several character POV, you can't invest in any of the characters. I suffered through the book, unable to read no more than 4,000 to 5,000 words per week. Sometimes I'd take entire weeks or months off because there's really no reason to go back to it. I should have DNF it, but I kept hoping it'll get good, enough to prove it as a classic read. Oh God, to compound the issue, the prose is boring. The sentences are cumbersome and easy to get lost or confused by. The pacing is poor. Plenty of telling rather than showing. And even when the writer shows, it's tedious to follow and visualize what he's showing. I'm a writer myself, and if I write a book like this and send it off to traditional publishers, it will be rejected. Better books than this have been rejected or panned, so how does Asimov's book become a classic? He was only 21 when he wrote the story, therefore hardly a skilled writer. He wrote all 70,000 words in roughly over a month, implying he never took the time to properly develop the ideas and refine his draft. A prolific author who published over 500 works of fiction in his lifetime, Asimov confessed that he had no time to read or write creative prose. What writer who doesn't read tell classic stories that stand the test of time? None. Foundation is a letdown that doesn't live up to its acclaim as a classic. So he laughed at this and said the top response is bang on. So the guy quotes this, so in Algernon Asimov writes, let's start with some facts. The Foundation trilogy was published in the early 1950s. That was published in the early 1950s. It was actually a collection of short stories that were published in the preceding decade. The book called Foundation is actually a collection of the first 4 of these stories. The first one was published in 1942, the fourth in 1944. The additional opening story was written in 1951 for the collection. So he did not write it all 70,000 words in 1 month. At the time he wrote these stories, spanning his 20s, writing was a side hustle for him. In his main life, he was studying biochemistry at college, getting a job with the Naval Science Laboratory, World War II was happening, being drafted into the Army, getting out of the Army, continuing his postdoctoral studies, getting a job at a pharmaceutical company. That was how his 20s were. That was the time he was writing those Foundation stories. He didn't become a full-time professional writer until his early 30s when he realized that his income from writing finally exceeded his income as a college associate professor. It's also important to note the audience he was writing for. He wasn't writing for any book publishers. Almost no companies published new science fiction books in the 1940s. The big market in that era was pulp magazines. He wrote on spec and submitted stories to magazine editors. Then quoting a prolific author, he published over 500 works of fiction in his lifetime. Asimov confessed they had no time to read or write creative prose. True, he was more concerned with conveying the story clearly than writing fancy prose. But his stories were popular. That's why they were collected into books in the early 1950s. The reason they were popular was because of the ideas, not the characters, not the prose. Science fiction in those days was mainly about ideas, and Foundation has some great ideas. Of course, the main idea was that the series would cover 1,000 years of future history, so there had to be a succession of characters from story to story. This also reflected the central assumption of psychohistory, that individuals don't matter, form reflected function. Apart from that, everything you complain about is simply your personal preference. You don't like Asimov's writing style. Other people do. It's as simple as that. I thought that was a pretty good reply to I mean, look, it's okay to not like Foundation, right? Like, there's lots of stuff that's regarded as a classic that people, understandably struggle with and may appreciate more when they come to it at another time, right? Like, I think most people's experience in English class in school is kind of reflects that. But I think the reason why I brought this up was it reminds me a lot of sort of the like, I'm mad that Swaddling Thunder was changed, or this skill is better than that skill. While we're doing Writing Craft Hot Takes, you can skip the first 100 pages of Fellowship of the Ring and not miss the actual start of the story. Careful, there'll be some people who beat you with cement-filled milk jugs for saying that. But I don't know, like it's so like you can't make everyone happy. I don't even know if it's really worthwhile trying to make everyone happy. one of the things I will say, Jesus, sorry. The tea, it's not working. So one of the things I will say for so the reason why I wanted to sort of highlight this stuff is to say that I think there are a number of expectations that go into Weather Factory games that I'm not entirely convinced are consistent with what the game is. So an example that I'll give you is that if I think from a purely mechanical point of view, it doesn't seem to make it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to craft certain recipes, right? What do you need for a salon? You know, you need, if you're going to have the maximum number of guests, 5 items, you know, at least one of each course. And it would make more sense to serve things like almonds, which do not use an element of the soul to prepare, than excuse me, honey haunted amber pie, right? Like, one item, one guest, you actually only need to satisfy one aspect. So why do you make the King's Luck pie? Why do you make the honey haunted, you know, amber pie, pumpkin pie? Because it's fun, right? Because you get to find out what those dishes are, and you get to sort of spend that time thinking about who is, you know, who's coming in and what you want to serve them and what sort of ideas are sort of fun to put together. And if you're into that, that's great. And if you're not into that, you know, that's fine too, because in the end, you just, you know, you play for your optimization and you move on, right? So I think where I was going with this was just this idea of book thieves. So I think probably what that one suffered from, excuse me, is I imagine when it comes right down to it, at least until the further stories get involved, there isn't a really big problem having a book stolen. So I'll give you an example here, right? Like, if Glimmerings was stolen before I got Book of the Extinguished Heart, that would be a disaster, because that's the only way that I can get bittersweet certainty from reading a book. I could still craft it, of course. I'm really sorry. So that one would be a disaster for me. But, you know, if Corso runs away with, you know, Cardia's Delights or something like that, you know, okay, you know, you've lost the book, but you're still able to get the pattern. Now, if you need to refer to something in Cardia's Delights, there's a problem there. And I guess maybe if you gave them the Newman text, but I guess the game does sort of warn you. But yeah, like, I can see how, you know, I can maybe invent a couple of scenarios in which it winds up being a more severe problem than it is. But, like, let's be honest here. I probably could stand to have a couple of Foresight texts stolen, right? But I guess the big thing here is that if you create this risk of losing the text, I think that feeling of loss, or that danger of loss, for seemingly just like a couple of Spintria in terms of a reward, I think most people just probably wouldn't help that person. And that kind of seems inconsistent with what the game was. So again, like, I want to really be careful in terms of how I frame it, because I think Weather Factory make wonderful games. And I think for the most part, it does not hurt the games that it's not balanced in the sort of sense that if you were making, you know, StarCraft, right, if the different factions aren't balanced, then people are going to be upset. Or actually, Darkest Dungeon's a good example of this, because, like, if we're honest, like, the Antiquarian and kind of the Jester, but not Like I can see the point of a jester, but like the antiquarian is really only there to help you make money. And the jester's not as useful as the hellion or whatever. But until they added the butcher's circus, the computer's not going to care that they're not balanced, right? The computer's going to let you kick its ass all day. So, I guess, you know, to me, it's something I notice about the game. I will admit that my behavior is affected by it. Like, there are some things I do and don't do in this game because ultimately it's easier, or it costs me less, or less time, or whatever. But on the other hand, I definitely feel that Weather Factory games have a reasonable, this is just interesting to do kind of factor. And it's a tough one, right? It depends in terms of how you play game. Like, chances are, if you're, you know, playing Old World, or, you know, or was it not Distant Worlds, oh, it's this procedural 4X. It's an interesting one. It's just really Shadow Empire. Like, it doesn't mean that if you like those games, you're not going to like a Weather Factory games. It just means you're going to put on a different hat. But anyways, I'm going on too long on this, so I'm going to just snip the thread and move on. Towards a fundamental aesthetic, or the House of Glass, Julian Cosley considered this his masterwork. Techniques for perception and analysis which permit invidious and apocalyptic conclusions. Probably the most assiduously suppressed book in history. The entire run was destroyed. Even the presses were melted and dispersed, but the manuscript edition has survived. The perfect hegemony of the hours is perhaps eternal, but Cosley proposes and describes confinement inescapable, aesthetic and optical techniques which might contain even an hour, profoundly disrupting the order of the Mansis. He presents this as his own work, but there are hints here and there that he received inspiration or even assistance from the nowhere hour named Snow. I will share, by the way, this is a museum trip I went to a few months ago. I've actually seen a book where there was a limited run done, and they actually bought, I don't remember if they dismantled or if there was just one press and they bought it, but I've actually now seen a book that was printed under very similar circumstances to this, where because they were concerned about the consequences of the book getting into the wrong hands, they actually went so far as to make sure that they also took the printing equipment so that it couldn't be reassembled that way. I thought that was a really neat little bit of history. Everything ultimately comes down to a choice between eternity and history. There's only one place you're safe from both, and it's not a place anyone would want to be. It's a prison that can only exist in certain histories. The book, by the way, the book is actually available to buy now. Like, clearly the secrecy is not a thing anymore. An afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. Of course, I also imagine the appeal of reading the book has now also gone that there isn't that secrecy anymore. Alright, the Radical Measure, glossed. The original Radical Measures was a manifesto for experimental poetry with occult properties, written in the 19th century by Dr. Aaron Peel. The original is notoriously incoherent. Much later, Christopher Olopoli took on the task of editing and glossing it. He has taken some liberties, but the updated version is generally well regarded. The hours have little time for poetry, Dr. Peel avers, but they have a tremendous amount of time for poets. Olopoli has added a note suggesting that this should in fact be the most tremendous time with poets. As the rose opens, Dr. Peel explains, enduring memory opens to the horizon. This is a way of saying something that cannot otherwise be said, and is best only written with one's eyes firmly closed. Olopoli's gloss reads, Horizon Sight Synthesis Method, reverse procedure with Nock to elaborate Gervinite in the chronsochord mode. Cleansing has left my skin burning, my teeth throbbing. The chorality rumbles beneath the membranous surfaces of the waking world. The Ascendant, the edgelong Dardash, boasts of her victories over her brother enemy Tareg in the days of the Shadowless Empire. Sweeter than wine, than nectar is the blood of my brother. We have raised up armies one against another. We have sated the Blackbone with the sinking of our ships. Dardish is boasting at length turns melancholy, and Edgelong is half a dyad. She may not defeat her hated brother enemy without ending herself. She doesn't even want to, but she is aware, to her frustration, that she is a piece on the board, an axle on the ox cart, an essential part in the eternal engine of contention which the Lionsmith and the Colonel use to sustain the world. The Scar in the Sky. Nin wrote this and came to regret it. Each page of this book contains one word only, but as each page is turned, a knowledge creeps in. The final page is crowded. Each reader of the book records the same word. Now it is my turn. The Carmine Petal Revised, an apparently theoretical project proposed by Lionel of the Society of the Noble Endeavor, which might permit the imprisonment of a renegade forge name, a very heavily revised edition of an earlier and even more controversial work. The book was evidently revised at some time after the Wars of the Roads had ended, but even then this kind of discussion would have been politically difficult. Lionel suggests that the disciplines of Scar and Hammer together would be necessary to create such a prison, but that either on its own would serve to release the occupant. Glimmerings, an anonymous prison diary written by a dreamer convicted of oniric irresponsibility and confined to the cucurbit. The prisoner is plainly terrified and bewildered by their situation, and they have been unable to wrangle a coherent explanation out of anyone, but the dreams keep coming and they keep writing them down. Snow, broken mirrors, half-heard sky music, flowers of white, red, and black, a blood-streaked winter dawn, the most notorious signifiers of oniric risk, fantastically vivid and detailed. No wonder they were locked up. Their final recorded dream is of a worm jewel beneath Brandkrug Isle, which they open with a key carved from their finger bone. Oop, I think I messed up. Recordings from the Althaban Abyss. Recordings from a subterranean space in the mountains near Baghdad of conversations between the entomologist Juliana Zawadzowski and an unidentified presence. Only Zawadzowski's part in the conversations is comprehensible to the listener. The other side consists of grating, buzzing, and rumbling sounds, perhaps only rock movements or artifacts of the recording process, which Zawadzowski nevertheless unhesitatingly translates. Zawadzowski seems to believe that the presence identifies itself as a name or remnant of the lost hour called Seven Coils. It pleads with her to assist its rebirth. It begs her to find something for it in the city of Emisa. Towards the end of the interview, Zawadzowski grows suspicious and repeatedly accuses the presence of being not the Seven Coils at all, only an inhabitant. The recording ends mid-sentence. All right, so let's take a minute here. So we're using Doranwall to level up Disciplines of the Hammer. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 of the 5 required. So I think we'll go for the good old-fashioned... Fear is easier to restore, so I'm going to use that. And we will... Okay, add you. We'll add the Arab in this case. At last, I'm something of an authority in this. So we're getting started. I imagine we're probably done the... Yeah, we'll have our sights and sensations soon. Now, before I go too far on that, I do want to take a minute here and just get the the information from the inescapable confinement. So the first question is, which of these desks gives me scale again? Okay, cool. Millicant's got to be the scale one. We are, however, short on the we are short of the actual what was I going to say? The Words. We don't have the history itself. Just a caution here, Hisley. This is going to be origins, and it will reference the Seglaz kind of the Carapace cross. So make a determination. Shell origin. The Carapace cross are a hybrid race, and once we were the Carapace cross. From the Seglaz kind, we inherited what we now call language. We long for what we were, and history too is hybrid. Adds scale and heart to your journal, replaces any other origin determination. Adding determinations to your journal makes it first possible, then easier to write a matching history. I'm actually kind of curious. I think if I do this with winter... Ooh. What desk do I have winter for? Ava's would cover it. No problem. I hope it was soon enough. I mean, again, I don't think some of the... It really depends how much you know about the Carapace cross, but I figure at least giving people the option is probably better than just saying, hey, if you didn't get to this part, you shouldn't have heard this yet, so... Alright, there will be no second dawn. There will be no second dawn, the adepts of this history. My last and greatest work will make a prison for the sharpest lights, the most perilous fires, and the kindling spark that might have been the dawn. So mostly what I wanted to see here was there's definitely differences in terms of the Newman that's used, but there will be no second dawn. It's consistent for each of the winter, so good to know there. And I guess we don't know knock yet, so let's go back to the Vagabond desk. We'll take our big shot. Horns and Ivories, I think? Yeah. Porphyrine gives me the knock. I think knock is a speech one. Speech the wound. Ooh. The gods from stone will be revenged. Actually, that's really interesting with inescapable confinement. Anyways, yes, speech the wound. Language is a scar. It was language that tore open the Mansus. Without language, we could have had no wars. Without language, we would still be fire, sky, earth. Adds knock and winter to your journal. Replaces any other speech determination. Okay. I'm starting to develop some preferences. So the first question I'm going to ask here is, can I use this in anything interesting for these books? So we had knock, scale, and winter. The road to Janus will probably help. Let's actually queue that up now. How much you want to bet I don't have the VAC? Nope. Alright, so it's Origins of Hours that... Yeah, so we'll definitely have that within a minute. It's going to be a tight window, so I might hold back, but... Excuse me. Let's get back on track. So I was going to do sights and sensations, and just reminding myself, so it was only winter that I was focused on. And it was going to be, yeah, Ragged Crossroads and Rhyme and Remembrance. So for Ragged Crossroads, that's 5. We've got... now that also... So that needs edge right. Okay. So I need more winter. Let's just start by getting as much winter as I possibly can. And let's... My bad. Let's just start with Introduction to the Histories again. Oh, we will, or no, we won't, actually. I'm gonna wait on that. So again, I'm specifically looking for winter here, nothing else. I think that's it. So now I can start going for the edge. However, I need to make sure it's not edge that I already am using here. So now we can do the... Now we can do the fear. I think that's True History of Valentine that we're on to now. Alright, more edgy things. I think we've kind of used them up. So, Ragged Crossroads. Apparently my 6s are all over the map. Yeah, so I guess moon. I think I'm spread a little thin as far as the different texts go, but I also don't think I have a better option right now. So we'll see what the sorry. We'll see what the day brings, and kind of play it by ear. And I think I'm probably going to have to wrap. I don't know if I'm going to get through the full day, but I've reached my 3-hour mark, and I'm sure most of you've noticed I'm coughing more than I was at the start. So that's a good signal that I should probably pack it up. But let's at least get the new books read. The Mirror of Melissenth, the daybook and dream journal of Abbess Melissenth, venerated as a saint and respected as an alchemist. Melissenth Melissenth speaks longingly of those we would call from behind the sky. Melisande claims that the sights and sensations arts that she describes can be used to invoke the dream of a star when sufficient sky aspect is invoked to uplift an ascendant harmony. Okay, Solace book. And 2 sights and sensations. Oops. Down below. Actually, hang on. I changed my solace. Yeah, there's really no way around it. Okay, that's fine. We'll wait it out. Skill is now level 6. Its power aspects have also increased. I think it's safe for me to... well, either or, really. Yeah, I'll wait it out. I was just thinking of getting another Newman, but I'll probably just keep these at discrete units again, so I don't need to worry about staggered desks. Okay, lots of reading to do. Introduction to the Histories. The 17th century mystic and antiquarian Claude Hersalt describes divergent incidents in 5 major histories. The prologue warns at... It really is whenever I breathe in that's, I'm just getting that tickle. The prologue warns at length of the iniquities of one Julian Cosley, a former colleague who Hersalt now describes darkly as a worm of worms. It seems Cosley advised Hersalt early in the writing of the book, but Hersalt later became suspicious. Hersalt identifies blood, silver, design, and the worms as the central axes of the histories, and claims that the so-called second history is the true one. Better now. Chion at Abydos, a play dealing with the 9-year sojourn of a snow goddess in the Thracian city of Abydos by Apollo Fireweaver, in English published in 1892, purportedly from an older Greek text. The entity called Chion arrives in a blizzard and demands the city gates are barred. As Abydos falls under her spell, the dead return but do not speak. For 8 years, the city is a place of slow death, frosty ecstasy, and silent beauty. But in the 9th year, a conspiracy of shouts is mounted against the quiet that Chion demands. The conspirators open the city gates, and a scarred man comes to drag Chion out by the hair. Summer returns, but the conspirators die of remorse. A True History of Valentine de Wolf, written in the third person by Valentine de Wolf. Rarely coherent, though it includes some useful footnotes on falconry and on exotic veterinary medicine. Valentine is obsessed with the meaning of the De Wolf coat of arms. On a field or a chevron in arched gulls between 2 corby heads, eased sable in chief and wolf sajant sable in base. Long have the 2 birds pursued my blood, yet one is no crow, yet it is darker. Long has the wolf rolled itself in gold like a clovered cow, until its slobberings stain our thoughts. The sea does not regret. Aeson Fekri, one-time Secretary Salvant of the Curia of the Isle, responsible for the Curia's healing efforts, writes of his experiences in Brandkrug and hints at his travels elsewhere. The sea does not regret the tide, Fekri writes, for when the tide is past, it leaves its traces on the sand, which traces are the sea's memory. Fekri is a keen fisherman and speaks glowingly of the fish suppers of Brandkrug. He also admits that his enthusiasm for the bounty of the sea has altered him, that before he came to Brandkrug he consumed only those things found in the earth. I was the greater thereby, but all of us give up what we were to become what we are. All right, that's Origin of Powers, so I'm going to skip over that for a minute. From History to Eternity, a contraband manual of the Inks of Revelation. Frequently. A contraband manual of the Inks of Revelation. The author explains in a brief foreword that she is a high-ranking officer of an agency of the duties, and that though she supports its mission, she has concerns about the long-term consequences of its work. All histories braided into a golden loop, a shining ascent to eternity. I had never imagined I could be afraid that there might be too few truths. I could be wrong, but I'd like to leave at least one door ajar. Ichor Auroral can be brewed into an Encastum Terminale associated with a second history, using Inks of Revelation techniques with Rose aspect. The author warns that this is exceptionally difficult, since these techniques aren't aligned with Rose, but that's why I'm hoping the door will stay ajar, even once all the others are closed. I wish you luck. I will actually say, if you want to laugh, Hisley the Fox, I'll leave it to you to decide whether this is appropriate to do or not. The Flayed Tantra. This Tantra is recorded as being spoken by an enigmatic individual identified as Peel, with many of the qualities of the mythological Naga. The Flayed Tantra played a notable part in Alexander Sparrow's paranoid pamphleteering. So I don't know if you've ever tried to give this to Dr. Aaron Peel, but you can decide whether or not that's an appropriate thing to do or not. The Locksmith's Dream, Incursus, the fifth and final volume of Teresa Galmier's notorious work, which began as an examination of parallels in the mystic dreams of artisans, but became an account of her own occult journey. This volume was apparently never published, nor allegedly even written, yet here it is. The law goes all the way back to Stone. The keys cannot be held or owned. This had, I believe, the unexpected consequence that those outside the law may hold and own them, but even they cannot keep them. And of course a key is no more physical than a spirit, but a spirit may be housed in a body, and I have touched a key with my own hands. So the Legions hold the keys. I had thought the Legions only old and powerful transgressors of the crime of the sky. But I begin to understand that the crime of the sky is more even than it seems, and why a twin, who unites what is not to be divided, might accept Elysian as her name. All right, and our big bit of homework here. The Origins of Hours. The sage and ecstatic Soham, a frequent visitor to the Mansis, claimed to have discoursed with the beach crow in person. Soham later insisted on a sky burial. All right, best of luck to you, Hisley. I'm sure you have put in the work. I'm sure you will do well, although I never loved the exams. Yeah, and I will hopefully be better when you stop by next time. I do apologize for the quality of the stream tonight, but I really didn't want to miss a week of streams. So I will be at the local game dev meetup next week, by the way. So there is going to be at least one more. There'll be at least one more absence, but that's a planned absence. Anyways, best of luck on your exam. Soham's writings veer from poetry to confession. He identifies from flesh those who were mortal, from blood those who arose from sacrifice, from light entry to the glory, and from stone those who arose before his knowledge. He insists that the moth was the first god who was blood, but later contradicts himself and claims it was the Red Grail. The Mansis was different before the first god came from light, but never doubted existed even then. So 3 Sacralamea. But what memory? Well, shucks. Probably a confounding parable. But I'm going to set this one aside until I know for sure. All right, so let's see what we're working with here. First up, Ragged Crossroads. So this one, I should use all the edge stuff I can first. And then the remaining winter. At last, I am something of an authority in this. Okay. So from there, It was Rhyme and Remembrance next. So that would need 5 at the end. Oh, brilliant. We've got just enough. All right. That makes me happy. So with that in mind, let's take Natan's desk. Yeah, it's both. Okay. Alright, so we will be able to read The Road to Janus. I actually don't think I need that much. I think I can get by with just a good old-fashioned Shapt, yeah. Okay, so, Sacralamea. So Resurgences and Emergences first. And then I start leveling up my 6s. So let's see if I can find 5 Moth and 5 Grail. Oh, and I do want to read another Newman, so let me just take a minute. So I kind of have the... I have the aspects that are relevant to my... the main ones that I'm interested in. So that's Rose, Sky, Winter, and Scale. So Grail, Lantern, and Moth actually sounds like a great combo. Yeah. I know what I'm reading. Alright, so, back on track. So, Resurgences and Emergences. As much Grail as I can manage. Then we do the Moth. So this will be one of these cases where I take advantage of the phonographs. We can probably throw a Fet at that. So that's 1. Two. We've already used the vac, so 3. I think I'm running out. Yeah. Okay. So I need 2 Moth. So I get 1 with the Impulse. What's the other Moth? Okay, not Moth, not Moth, not Moth, not Moth. Not Moth, not Moth, not Moth. bunch. Not moth. Not moth. Still not moth. Not moth. Not moth. Not moth. Not... Well, it is moth, but we've already got it. Okay. I was worried about that. So technically the cloudy day would help me out, but... Well, here. Okay, so the occult scrap saves me for this one. So resurgences and emergences is now accounted for. So Sacrolamea is the next sensible one. This gives me a small advantage, actually, because I can use Thyrza's phonograph, and we can listen to Opening the Sky, or the Invisible Opera, but we'll do Opening the Sky. Starting to run out of options. I think I'll use the health this time around. Excuse me. So Singlefoot songs for the Savage Hand. There's my Storm. I guess we only have room for the Solace now, but that's still not a bad spot to be, all told. So yeah, the Sky will be a bit easier for us to work with once we sort of clear out what's already, or once we clear out the existing demands on our desks. The other thing I'll do to make my life a little easier, let's go to the grand piano. I think if I use strings and songs, I'm really not doing myself any favors by... Okay, you know what? Let's use strings. String and song at the piano. Upright piano. We can do a Wistful Air, which I don't believe you can get from a book. Okay. I think because of... Oh my goodness, I've already got Solace. Alright, so I did waste a desk with that. So here's what I think I'm going to do. I will wait the 30 seconds, but I think I'm going to have to call it here. Just because I don't think the stream's going to get any better, and I have hit the 3-hour mark. But I'm going to write myself a pretty good to-do list, and I'll do an overview about the plans for the second half of today. Today in game, of course. Alright, the skill is now level 6. Its power aspects have also increased. So, Rhyme and Remembrance. We had Sights and Sensations. I'm really hoping I didn't mess this up. Okay, yeah, no, we've got Whist. So, Regret, Confounding Parable, Intuition, Clouds, Salt. So what I was thinking was maybe we could use the Clouds with the Occult Scrap, or in place of the Occult Scrap, but honestly at this point it doesn't really matter. Excuse me. At last, I am something of an authority in this. So, on my to-do list, Resurgences +1, Sacrolamea +1, and Watchman's Paradoxes, I think. Oops. Sorry, I'm just making some notes here. Okay. So that gives me an idea of where I was going with those. Now, we are reading... Oopsies. Excuse me. We're going to be getting... what was it? Door and Wall. So from Door and Wall... Great Signs and Great Scars, but everything else is going to be leveling up from 6. Good lord, we're really making progress. Okay, I'm going to have a bit of a think on that one, because there may be some sense in taking... Edict's Liminal may actually make sense of this one. Anyways, I'll have a think on that. So, so just leaving a note for myself for Door and Wall. So depending on how long it takes me to digest the Door and Wall, this is also the point we should consider Cylon Prep. Obviously, that doesn't have to be the first thing of the next season, but I do want to get a move on that one, particularly because I think a lot of the individuals are potential candidates for the Lighthouse Institute. And then, yeah, I guess the rest of it's really just trying to figure out what determinations we want to go with, but I'm going to leave that later. I'm slightly I'm slightly pushing towards Rose for speech, and I'm also debating on Winter for the first flower. I can at least see some sense in those particular choices for where I want to go with that. But that's also going to be the subject of quite a bit of discussion in future episodes. So I'm not gonna make any permanent decisions until the until we're good and ready. But yeah, I think I gotta wrap it up here. Sorry for all the coughing. I don't know if I made the right choice by, by streaming instead of taking another day off, but I really didn't want to take another day off. Just a reminder for the overall schedule, assuming that there isn't any, health issue or anything like that, my expectation is that I will be back on Monday for Twitch. Hopefully next week it'll be a full YouTube series. I'll do my best to record those. The 15th, I am going to be at the local game dev meetup, so there will be no stream. I do apologize because I realize it's a couple of Wednesdays in a row now that I haven't streamed. We had January 1st was New Year's Day. This week I, of course, was sick, so that's going to be 3 Wednesdays that I miss in a row. That's just the way it turned out. And then I will hopefully be well enough for streaming on the 17th. If I'm not well enough on the 17th, I think I should write up a will or something. But yeah, obviously all of this is conditional on me feeling well enough. I'm sure I will. But I just wanted to try and let people know as far ahead as I could on planned absences. Finally, let's save up and see who is online to host. Also, I didn't notice there was a M6O fixed a bug where not all parts of the wisdom tree were... Oh, that's wonderful. All right, let's see who's online. Oh, you know what? I think I saw someone working on a cultist simulator thing. Let me just take a minute here. Okay, apparently my eyes deceive me. But we do have Vesper Fortune VT, who's a VTuber and has been streaming. He streamed Cultist Simulator in the past. I think he will do Book of Hours at some point in the future. But I know he's definitely a Weather Factory friendly streamer, definitely an overall friendly streamer, and feels like a good option to send you all off to. So I hope you have a wonderful time over in Vesper's neck of the woods. I'm gonna go get some sleep, maybe a refill on the tea. I thank you all for your patience, both with the absences and the less than stellar stream tonight from the coughing point of view. I definitely don't want to take the viewership for granted, so thank you all for watching. I will see you all Monday, fingers crossed, and please treat Vesper well. Until then, take care.